Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode number 17 of the Worship Guitar Show. So glad to have you with us tonight. We are on one of my favorite subjects, gear. Now, there is a lot of talk about gear. There is a plethora of demos on YouTube demonstrating the latest and greatest gear. One of the things that I don't hear a lot of gear talk about is kind of having
Hello, ladies and
Uh-oh.
gentlemen,
No, no, no,
and
no, no, no,
welcome
no,
to
no, 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 no,
episode
no,
number
no, 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 no.
17
You will not be
of the
doing that
Worship
over
Guitar
there.
Show.
Hang
So
on a
glad to
second.
have you with us tonight.
No, 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 no. There we go. Shh. I forgot that Facebook likes to do that to me. In any case, I can see everybody down there in the chat. Brett, how are you? Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. Bruce, always a pleasure to have you there, kind of hanging out, catching the questions there in the chat there on Facebook. Everybody that's joining us here on YouTube, first of all, thanks so much for hanging out. It is going to be a really interesting show tonight because, I've spent a lot of years demoing gear. I've spent a lot of years having students kind of asking me about, what should they buy, and people get fixated on an individual piece of gear versus actually thinking about it in the framework of the rig in which they're going to place it. And one of the things about this that is really important is that we want to be aware of what is new, what's the latest and greatest, but we also want to have a framework in which we think about placing that gear. And I think, I've said this a number of times, but I haven't said it for a while. If you spend any time on Craigslist looking at the good things that people have bought that they're selling for whatever reason, and then the fact that Craigslist is filled with a ton of really, really bad gear decisions, my belief is that most of the time those gear decisions are based on not having had a strategy in mind that works around an individual piece of gear. So we're going to talk about guitars. We're going to talk about the different types of rigs you might be thinking about putting together. And then we're going to talk about kind of the component considerations. We're also going to get a chance to kind of talk about some of the nuances of, when and where is it worth spending extra money, like cables. And then also, as I kind of mentioned in the little preview video, you know, when it's time to sell a piece of gear, there's actually a backstory to that. When you look again on Craigslist and you see all those pieces of gear, I don't know if you're like me, my therapy is sometimes to sit there and go through Craigslist and see what people are selling because I want to know what people are interested in. I want to keep my hands, if you will, on the pulse of kind of what's out there. But I'm constantly amazed. I'm like, why did that person ever buy that? And where did it make sense to do that? Now, here's the things. I'm not one of the, cork sniffers that thinks, oh, it's got to be expensive. There are certain places that I think it's worth spending some extra money on, but there are certain places where if it gets the job done, it gets the job done. So, with that said, Elijah, hey, Peru, hola, bienvenidos. Brett, again, always a pleasure. Always look forward to seeing you here as well. So, here's the thing. First of all, anybody drop your questions in here. Now, one of the interesting things is I always, see the number of people tuned in, and I look at like the amount of questions that we get, and I'm first of all thrilled because it hints that unless people just leave it on play and they're out eating dinner and watching television, that whatever we talk about is engaging enough that you want to hang out for. That said, I am here to serve you because I think a lot of people, again, using Craigslist as the operative, there are a lot of bad gear decisions that people make, which means there's a process that precedes that. Now, a moment ago, I talked about when you actually go to sell something, that's usually when you really find out, maybe I should have bought the HD 500 instead of, I think it was the HD 400, right? Because all of a sudden, it's like it made sense kind of maybe to save a little bit of money at the front end, but when you're not able to sell it at the end of that gear ownership, then you realize, and these are the sorts of things that we want to keep in mind about this. Again, what role does it place in your rig? Does it fulfill the needs that you have for that role? As worship musicians, one of my favorite things is to say, just because we play at church doesn't mean we only play at church. So it means that sometimes a piece of gear is going to actually have to pinch hit across a couple of different types of styles, genres, setups, so on and so forth. So we want to be aware of that. So again, hit me with your questions. All right, so let's dig in. So I've made a couple of notes here that I want to start with, and I want to start off by talking about rigs. First of all, there is the kind of, if you will, I am getting ready to go into mad demo mode here. So, yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've got the Fractal, we've got the Kemper, and we've got the Helix. It's the kind of the Trinity. And I didn't get a chance to rack it yet, but I've also got the Waza Tube Amp Expander. I am a gear fanatic, and I'm privileged enough to have a lot of access to gear. But because of that, I don't really ever want to be a gear snoot. I want to be a gear explorer. Kind of like the Indiana Jones of gear. It's an adventure because I love finding myself in the gear and helping other people find their tone and their sound in the process. So that said, there are the virtual modeling and profiling types of rigs where, generally speaking, you can go into that thing and you can go straight out into a PA for the house of worship, and you're generally dialed, especially if you're using in-ear monitors. I'm in the process of getting ready to do a rather intensive demo for the Tech 21 Power Engine Deuce Deluxe, which is kind of their replacement for the Power Engine 60, which was one of the very first for hire gear demos I ever did. And I basically plugged, I think, 5 or 6 different type of modelers into that, and I just had an amazing time loving all of that. And I don't care whether it's expensive, whether it's cheap. If I can have a great time, that's what it's all about, right? So the idea, though, is generally these types of devices you can go direct when and if you need to. All right, then there is the traditional pedal board type of rig where you're running the pedal board into the front end of some type of amplifier. I am a big fan of the amps, and I think you can see it back there. No, it's been moved. My apologies. The Rev D20, I actually have a pair of them, and I'm getting ready to do, you'll see that in the next issue of Worship Musician Magazine, working those guys in stereo. I'm a big stereo fanatic. We're going to get to the stereo bit in a moment. But the great thing about those amps and the Fender Tone Master Deluxe Reverb is they have speaker cab simulation built into the amplifier. So it means that if you don't want to have stage volume, but you want to have great sound, that's an option that you've got built into the amplifier. So in those situations, having a pedal board into that type of rig is perfect for worship. All right. Now that gets us to this whole kind of stereo, wet, dry, wet, dual mono, so on and so forth. Now, I am a big stereo fanatic. Oh, look at the chat. This is great. I'll get over there in just a moment. So the thing is that I love a stereo image because, as you've probably heard me talk about, perhaps excessively, I like to be able to create this kind of pocket for the lead vocal to sit in the middle of, or if you're playing instrumental music, the lead guitar. And so by being able to work in a stereo configuration, you're able to do that. Now, wet, dry, wet. Now, there is a bit of confusion as to what wet, dry, wet actually is. And arguably, my favorite version of that is wet, dry, dry, wet, where, again, I like to work with the placement of things across the stereo field to, again, be able to support where the lead vocal sits in the mix. And so by having wet, dry, wet, just in its organic state, you basically have, let's imagine we've got a dual delay where it's a dotted eighth and a quarter note. Pure delay left and right. In the center, you just have the dry guitar amp. What this gives you the ability to do is front of house have the maximum amount of control to make it fit the venue. One of the things about live venues is that you, as much as, I have a lot of experience playing venues of different sizes. I've played in front of 250,000 people at the Bill Graham Memorial outside. Playing outside is kind of a whole deal in and of itself. But I've also played very small venues. There's a venue in Portland, Oregon called the Roseland Theater, which is a perfectly square cement box. Now, the interesting thing is there is a strong echo in that room, but it's actually a great sounding room. Then there's the baked potato, which the walls and the ceiling and the floor are completely covered. And every time I've gone in there, I've turned up my delay and reverb thing. I'm going to have enough delay and reverb to make this gig work. Not the case. The room, when you play, you're playing the room as well as your rig. And the thing is, you actually can't be out in the room, obviously. You can go out and be wireless for a sound check. But ultimately, when it comes to actually making the most of the room when it's filled with people, and the sound tech is back there trying to make all the pieces work. A wet, dry, wet rig is a great option because it gives the sound tech the ability to separate your delays and your reverbs from your direct signal. So if they need a little bit more punch, they can mix it as they need to from song to song, which is great. They can kind of work with if you have the bandwidth there on the mixing console, work with a trio of channels, and you can bring them up and down as a group or put them into a little submix or whatever you might do there. But what that does is it gives your sound tech a lot of freedom to really mix and interact with you. And I've had the pleasure of working with some great sound techs, which has been great. So that wet, dry, wet gives you the opportunity also, if you've got the channels on your IEM, if you actually have the opportunity to put your delays and reverbs in one stereo channel and then put your direct signal in another and put that one dead center and put the other ones panned left and right. It's just creating that perfect sweet spot. Now, a moment ago I talked about wet, dry, dry, wet, and that's kind of my favorite thing, to work with a pair of amplifiers. And by kind of creating that little nest in the center where the lead vocal lives, I've got guitar left, guitar right of the direct signal, and then my delays and the reverbs on the outside. And it kind of creates this little trail that moves through there. It's kind of 3D. I love that. It's basically just a slightly glorified version of wet, dry, wet. And I like to have those 2 amps or cabinets or IRs, whatever it is, slightly different so you get this kind of opening and closing effect. Now, that said, there are a lot of people that love just dual mono. Now, there are advantages to dual mono. So let's say, for example, I just have another guitar player that I'm playing with. By having the same amp left and right, you can pull the one amp back a little bit for the side that the other guitar player is on, and it doesn't really affect the vibe. That is to say, when I use a pair of amplifiers together, the way they expand and contract, I kind of like to zipper them together, if you will. Now, again, not everybody plays in stereo. Not everybody wants to play in stereo. But in particular, because so many of us use modeling devices in worship, it's the perfect environment to do that in. All right, let me take a moment and look at the chat here real quick before I start talking about templates. And in case you can't tell, I'm a little excited. I don't know why I'm rubbing my hands together. It's not cold down here, but this is exciting stuff. So I hope you are as excited about this as I am. Oh, awesome. So let me go through and, first of all, dig in a little bit. There we go. Christopher Aaron Smith. Strangely, strategy. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to read a little bit and I'm going to engage. And thank you so much for dropping stuff in the chat. I love it. To determine what sound you're trying to get, what you can afford, and the setting or settings you are performing in. So I'm going to stop right there. So giant pearls of wisdom dropping down like rain. I think so many guitar players, again, don't think about what is the sum of the parts going to be like, and strategically doing this. Now, Helix, Fractal, Kemper do a great job of kind of giving you everything. But if you don't know what you're trying to aim for in the setting that you're in, this is where you get into a little bit of trouble. So I'm going to kind of respond to that particular one. And hello to Buffalo, New York there, Forrest Landis. Jumping back into this. So there are a couple of templates that I pointed out. There is the Jimmy template, where you're kind of using a fuzz face and a wah-wah and a univibe and a Strat with a whammy bar and a couple of Marshalls. Now, that's not a traditional Sunday morning type of thing, but that is one of the key templates. And also Jimmy's clean tone playing through Fender amps. That's a very special sound. In turn, there's the Eddie. Again, another Marshall setup where it's kind of this plexi brown sound Marshall. Again, Lincoln Brewster would be a great house of worship example of that sound, where it's got some hair to it, right? And when it opens up, it's great, but at the same time, it's got this warmth to it that is the essence of why people love tube amps. The thing about those particular amps, and I'm going to hit the pause button here for just a second, because this is important. Many guitar players do not have the background of somebody going, hey, by the way, as you switch styles or amps or guitars or pedals, don't expect to do the exact same thing with your right hand. or your picking hand if you're left-handed, right? The right hand, like this is just kind of like my crazy world here. Like these are all the different picks that I pick from when I'm doing stuff in the studio. And we've talked a little bit about transients in previous sessions here, but the initial moment that you attack the string with the pick, there's this, and the sound of that attack is dramatically impacted by how hard or soft you hit with your right hand. And again, if you think about the location of harmonics with the left hand, that same harmonic component is true as you move your hand closer or further away from the bridge, hence the bridge pickup and the neck pickup. They sound markedly different, and in the same way they're picking up the sounds underneath the strings. When you're hitting the string on top of the string, that same difference is in there. And I think a lot of guitar players, again, if you think about, let's say the attack is this axis, and then the location from bridge to neck is this axis. Think about all those different tone points that are in there. And that, for me, is what I'm always trying to do. I'm kind of going, where is that thing? And I'm going to move around with my right hand, and I'm going to change how hard or soft I'm going to hit with the right hand. And I'm also going to choose which pickup selection I'm on. And in turn, I'm going to choose different pedals that I'm going to use to emphasize different things in that spectrum. So the settings, again, then you're kind of going, okay, the right rig. So, the Jimmy rig for church is probably not going to elicit the desired response when you show up with the 3 Marshall stacks and they start hearing the as it's all plugged in, da 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 da. It's just not quite the right rig for that setting. I love the setting. That's great. Thank you, Christopher. Shane, I was hoping I was going to see you here tonight. How are you, my friend? Okie dokie. Whisperer. Shane calls me the gear whisperer, which is one of my favorite terms of endearment ever. So thank you for that. You have no idea how much that warms the heart. All right, Brett, here we go. Brett, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. So Sanor? S-A-N-O-R. Sanor. Okay. That is the toughest thing that I run into for amps. Finding the affordable solution to cover many genres for church and personal music endeavors. Okay. So let's break that up. If I were to go, the best way to do that, if in other words, kind of let's just say, let's try and find an affordable way to do that. There's a video I'm getting ready to do called basically 5 ways to use HX Stomp. And the idea is kind of like, well, what are all the wacky ways that I could do that? Hold on, let me just make sure I'm reading from the script here and make sure I've got it right. So use it as a fly rig. 1 box and you're done. Use it as a virtual pedal board, which is kind of where we're headed on this. Use it in the effects loop of your amplifier, just as basically for your time-based effects. Use it as an audio interface, and then use it for reamping for the amp models. And the effects, you can add that in there as well. All right, so here's the thing is that if the solution is a complex one, that's one of the places that modeling is really good. That's one of the other times when we begin to go, okay, what amp has the widest range of things that I can kind of interface all the different things that I want to do with it? A couple come to mind. I desperately wish the Hot Rod Deluxe 4 had some sort of speaker simulation on it. But one of the other demos that's coming is with the 2 Notes. I'm going to totally forget their new fancy little box, but it's here and it's upstairs. But you guys know what I mean. And so you can use that, and basically, as long as it's a tube amplifier, use the reactive load that's in there and load different IRs. So that's the solution for that. That's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. So the Hot Rod Deluxe, what's great about it, got a great clean channel. It's got kind of a pseudo second overdrive channel that's foot switchable. That's got a gain control on there. It's got an effects loop, and so it means that you could run a pedal board into the front end. That pedal board could be a virtual pedal board, and that's kind of why I referenced HX Stomp there, in that you can kind of, and that's one of the other things that I love to do with Helix, which you can't see here. Let's see if I can break stuff. Am I going to break stuff tonight? Sure. Let's try and break some stuff. All right, so are we there? No, come on, where are we? Nope, 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 nope. Oh, I've got a locked scene. I got it. All right, let's go over here. There we go. So there's the Helix. Come here, baby. There you go. So the great thing about a Helix is basically it's this great, basically a virtual pedal board. So you can just use it as a bunch of stomps into the front end of something, right? Now, here's the deal. When we're talking about affordability, this thing's over $1,000, so that's not the cheap solution of it. So an amp like a Hot Rod Deluxe, what's great about it is that you can use just regular analog stomps. You know, if you're looking for a couple of examples of just kind of obvious places to start, Tube Screamer. You cannot go wrong with a Tube Screamer. I think, honestly, I'm going to say it. I think every guitar player should own a Tube Screamer. Now, somebody's going, well, TS9 or TS808? Either. And preference, they're both great. The other thing is that then kind of going, okay, a great distortion pedal, if that's kind of part of your thing, the Bogner Red, that pedal, the Ecstasy, great distortion pedal because it's basically like a Marshall amplifier. And you'll have to excuse me, I'm going to pull closer and look mean. If you're looking for punch and aggression or you want to dial it back, that's just a great box. So now all of a sudden you've got two stomps, put some sort of delay in the loop that can run at line level. We're going to hit a little pause button there for just a second. When you run into the front end of an amplifier, you're running at, you guessed it, instrument level. But the effects loop is generally designed to take, I don't actually have any rack gear right by me, but I've got like an SDE 3000, kind of that was kind of like one of the go-to studio delays in the, I think it came out in the 80s, but definitely in the 90s. And so Steve Vai used those very famously. And they're great sounding delays. And that delay is actually, I learned from my buddy Jeff Slingluff from Boss/Roland that delay is actually the basis for all the DD pedals. That makes sense, which is why people love the DD pedals. No, not the Doug Doppler pedals, the Boss DD 3, 5, 7, so on and so forth. You got it. And I think the DD3 is, which is, last time I checked, was still in production, is the longest production running delay pedal. Now, the thing about those pedals, if you put them in the effects loop, you will potentially have them brown out. And that's because they're designed to be instrument level. That is to say, they're designed to be put on your pedal board, your guitar into them, that instrument level signal going into the front end of the amplifier. When you go into the effects loop, you need something that has the ability to either toggle between instrument and line level, like Strymon pedals can do, but again, we're getting up in price tag, or some pedal that is designed specifically to live in the loop. And when you have something browning out in the loop, you really know it just kind of sounds like a great sounding piece of gear when the battery starts to go bad. You can just kind of go, oh. And the bummer about it is you don't necessarily notice it at lower volumes, but as you turn up the volume or master volume, you start to really goose the thing in the loop, unless there's some attenuation on the loop, which is a different conversation. And most amplifiers don't have the ability to choose the level of what's going on in the loop. We're going to head back into the chat. Okay, so the Hot Rod Deluxe 4, a great option to kind of go, I need something that can do lots of different things. A TS808 or a TS9, the Bogner Ecstasy Red pedal. I actually really like the Dunlop compressor. I think that's a great sounding compressor. And if we're looking for something to go into the front end of the amplifier, the Warship community didn't have a lot of love for the DD7. It's a very small footprint. I think it's a great sounding pedal with a ton of functionality for the money. In spite of the fact that it's not necessarily cool with some of the Warship folks, it's just a great sounding pedal. And so there we have that. Great stuff. All right, let me head back in here. And thank you, Brett. That was great. Wayne Schwartz, how are you? Guam. Thanks so much. That's right. Of course. Yeah, Wayne. Awesome. Hi. Jim Giannini, how are you? Yay, gear. Awesome. Yes. Okay, Rev Amps. Hello, Bruce. Tube Screamer and a deluxe reverb. There we go, Shane. Can't go wrong there. And as long as we're on the conversation of deluxe reverb, the Hot Rod Deluxe is a great amp for the money. It's first of all, it's one of the best-selling amps of all time because it has a great range of features, including the effects loop, which, unlike the deluxe reverb and unlike the Tone Master Deluxe reverb, those don't have effects loops. So the great thing about the Hot Rod Deluxe is that you have a huge range of options with that amplifier, and it's super affordable in the world of relatively affordable. Okay, I love my PV1. This is Wayne. Love my PV112 Valve King and my PV JSX Mini Colossal. There we go. So the interesting thing is that oh yeah, I've got a JSX over there, and I've never owned. There was a period of PVs that I haven't had a chance to spend a lot of time with. To my loss is that the PV Tweed stuff is supposed to be phenomenal. I just haven't had a chance to play with it. Which, by the way, we're going to hit the pause button there for just a moment, and we're going to talk about this concept of tweed versus blackface. Because again, as we were talking about different types of templates, one of the things that's very unique about amplifiers is that there are, if you will, tone templates. That is to say, you've got your tweed fenders, you got your blackface fenders, you have your vintage non-master volume Marshalls, and then you have your modern higher gain Marshalls, right? Like those are kind of the main-ish flavors out there. I really wasn't going to forget the AC30, you know that, which is its own completely unique flavor. And as long as we're going to go there, then we start talking about the subset of the cabinet thing, which is this. And I'm not going to rabbit trail too far on the cabinet end other than to say this. Generally speaking, kind of the classic cabinet combinations are part of the magic that people are looking for. That is to say, there's something about a 112 that makes a deluxe special. There's something about 410s that make a super reverb special. You can't see it, but there's a super reverb hiding over there. The Tone Master Deluxe reverb is there. The other deluxe reverb is up there, and then there's a tweed up there. Each one of those is tweed is a little more jangly naturally. The deluxe reverb is just a little bit, or I should say, blackface fenders are a little bit, not that they can't be bright, but they're a little bit darker. They're a little bit more reserved. AC30, it's got this chime and jangle on the top, but the bottom end, if you've ever tried to chug on an AC30, it ain't happening. They're loose in the bottom end, and that's part of the magic. They kind of have this kind of triangularity, if you will, where the top is a little bit tighter, and the bottom end is this kind of this slightly loose thing. The Marshall stuff, people, a vintage Marshall is actually a very difficult amplifier to play. We'll keep you honest in a hot second. The cabinets that kind of go with those generally made sense. 412 cabinet with a Marshall, there's a reason. The fenders were combos because they just, that breathing out of the back of the amp and coming out of the front of the amp, part of the magic. Same thing with the AC30. All right, let's dig in a little bit further. All right, so when this is Christopher Aaron Smith. When it comes to modelers and pedals, I strictly use a Headrush pedal boards, straight time Churches PA using straight into, I got it, that's autocorrect, straight into Churches PA using either a Taylor 314 CE or a Fender FMTHH. Due to our smaller church size, amps are not an option. Again, this is the whole thing about knowing your venue, right? If amps aren't an option, they're not an option, and that is something to keep in mind. All right, where's my mouse? Come on, why are you doing this? Where has my mouse gone? That's very strange. There we go. Now you're back. All right, good. All right, Shane, stereo would be nice, but my church board is set for mono. So, okay, again, this is the setting. If it's mono, you ain't doing stereo. Moving on. Okay. Point noted, and that's all right. I'm gonna visit that for a hot second. All right. So what do we do? It's like the board actually can run stereo. Somebody somewhere made a decision about we're gonna run it in mono. Um, there's usually a good reason for it, but there's also the right way of asking, which is like, I love playing in stereo. I'm curious why we run in mono. And I think when we ask the right questions, sometimes the reason that people do stuff uh, is just because, well, that's just kind of how the guy before me did it. So that's how I did it. Or, the room has kind of got some weird stuff on this side, or there's a bunch of scaffolding or something on this one side of the room, and it's better to just run it mono. I find that, the interesting thing is, if Bruce is still on here, he interviewed, and I was just in the background, Chad Veach today. And he said, it was just bombs left and right the whole time. But one of the things he said is like, he doesn't have a problem with conflict, because what's great about conflict is you're able to kind of resolve stuff, right? It means that there's stuff to be talked about. The conflict's not the problem. It's the not resolving stuff that's the problem. So, if we can't talk about stuff, we miss the opportunity to find resolution. And resolution, that's where we come together and we join arms and we move forward. So I think people mistake the conflict, that is to say, we have differing opinions about it, but when we can hear each other, then we can move forward, right? You get it. All right. Okay. I love it, Shane. We played in a skateboard half pipe at a youth conference once. That's awesome. All right. Andrew TMF. Hello. If we haven't met before, hey, okay. I just bought a headrush pedal board. The tones and rigs I can get out are mind blowing. Even wet dry effects. Oh wait, there's more. Hang on, wait, there's more. Expanding. I'm using that. The flat frequency response speakers running start. Awesome. I am waiting for the headrush folks are supposed to be sending me the little 8-inch ones. So on Sweet. Okay. My other spoiler for gear purchases. And some of you have heard me say this before. Sweetwater, I go onto the Sweetwater website and I do a search, and then you have the ability to quantify by most popular. And then in turn, you're also going to see the number of stars. And I think even on that first kind of results, you're going to see, that is to say, 1 to 5 stars. And I think there's a little number there that tells you how many people were actually involved in that 5-star rating. So if you see, for example, 20, the number 20 and then 5 stars. So the interesting thing is that I think, I don't know, a month and a half ago, we did one of these where we talked about our tube amps toast. And so one of the things that happened is I kind of did that search on, I think it was amps under $1,000 or amps under $500. And I don't remember which it was, and I should. But the headrush, basically their 8-inch self-powered, FRFR powered speaker system was in the top 5 of all the amps on Sweetwater. I was just like, okay, I've got to check this out. And the interesting thing is the 8 inches or the 10 inches, the 10 inches, no, the 8 inches, pretty sure it's the 8s, were more popular than 12 inches, which were a little bit more expensive. But, as a guitar snob, I'm like, well, if it doesn't have a 12-inch speaker in it, it doesn't have a 12-inch. With the exception of a super reverb, and then all of a sudden it's cool because that was cool, right? The point being, I was like, I saw basically was all 5-star reviews and like 20 or more of them. I was like, okay, the rest of the world knows something that I need to find out about. So the point being, Sweetwater is a great place to kind of go, what do other people think about it? And then you can start reading the reviews and see how they're using it and where they're using it. Again, getting back to the situation that people are using stuff in. Okay, got a great question come out up here. Wayne Schwartz, what's your advice for smaller churches for sound? We have around 80 people, and it's a small place, so I end up miking my Roland Cube. Okay, so first of all, the Roland Cubes are great little amps. In a smaller setting like that, a couple of thoughts come to mind. One of my favorite hacks in a smaller venue is to place the amp on the side of the platform facing me. And traditionally, I have a tendency to kind of hang out over here. Bass player is on, if you will, the hi-hat side of the drummer. So the bass player is over there. and then the drummer's there, and then I'm kind of over here, and then placing the amp there, kind of coming in, but standing a little bit back, such as the worship leader, even though they're potentially having in-ears in, that sound will still potentially bleed into the in-ears, and it'll also bleed into a microphone. Hey, so the idea is you have it back a little bit, and you have it facing sideways, and then you level it up a little bit. So in case you aren't using in-ear monitors, or in case you want to have the guitar hear a little bit of its signal, that's a great way to do it. And then I used to do that actually with some of the entry-level Orange amplifiers that had a speaker sim on the back. So I kind of had a little bit of volume on the platform, but then we also had them just going direct out into the PA. Nothing like an SM57 to kind of get the job done. Kind of can't go wrong. I would always suggest putting a couple little pieces of tape like this, such that you just kind of know where that sweet spot is. So regardless of who's on the sound desk, they just kind of go there. You know, maybe with a pencil, you put some markings on the amp of where the volume's going to set, and maybe if you got a wireless, you get a chance to go out and hear it in the venue, the sanctuary. Thank you. Or gymnasium, whatever it may be, and hear what it's like as it bounces around. I had a very interesting experience on a Sunday morning in Canada where I was subbing playing bass. I was up there doing something, and the interesting thing is the sound tech came to the platform, and hopefully you've never seen this particular flavor of thing, but they were basically having a meltdown. They just basically lost their mind, and they were like, about the volume, and they're just besides themselves. I'm like, what? So as it turns out, I was playing in a corner, and somehow I managed to actually have somebody else play or something and walked out in the venue. And I have never had this phenomenon happen like this. But one of the things that I do when I'm in, dare I say, the shower, is I kind of will take, and I do this at hotels too, is I'll take kind of the mirror and the the countertop, and I'll lean my iPhone like this, and then what it does is it kind of amplifies the sound out, and just kind of projects it in a very powerful way. And as it turns out, that was happening, and the bass was crazy loud, even though I couldn't really hear it where I was. Something about where it was in the corner. And once I got out front, I was like, this guy's totally right. I'd be losing my mind if I were back there at the sound desk too. We fixed it. They were happy. I heard them. There was a little bit of conflict. They were a little heated, but because they just thought I wanted to be that loud, right? I mean, that was this guy, this Doppler guy comes up from the United States, and he thinks it's okay to play the bass that loud. I was like, no. Holy cow. Once I heard what they were hearing, so the ability to kind of know what it sounds like throughout the venue is a huge thing. And, and I have a lot of experience, generally speaking. It's going to be a funny thing, but I've learned to feel sound in my solar plexus. In that, I'm a big fan of microphones, and generally, once I kind of have enough level, larger than church level most of the time, as I'm working in the studio, I kind of go, I can feel at my solar plexus how much the bass is hitting me, how much of the mid range is hitting me, and just kind of like a sense of how much high end I'm hearing. And I'm usually like, this mic, there. And it's just kind of from the same thing of kind of knowing, oh, I'm looking for that particular sound. I'm going to pick up the yellow Tortex and I'm going to hit like that. It's just one of the things you learn, and that's kind of the dealio. So awesome. Brett, I use a Boss GT100 Direct with the same kind of situation. Now, and that's what's great about that, especially if you have the ability to monitor using IEMs. It gets a little bit trickier when you're monitoring out of a wedge, and in that. When I say a wedge, of course, a fallback monitor, because those have a tendency to flavor the sound. And so I toured Europe with a GT6, and basically all I did was, it was in the rider for the tour, that there would be a backline amp with an effects loop. And basically what I did is I ran the output of the GT6 into the power amp in on the back of whatever head was there. And so basically it meant I could get my preamp sound and the power amp sound. So it was about 60 to 80% my sound, pretty continuous from night to night. Now that said, because I was working with tracks, one of the things is that because the monitors are all different brands and configuration, the majority of the time I wasn't super happy with what was coming out of the monitors, because I like to have some guitar coming back, especially kind of the volume that I like to play at. If you have too much volume coming from the back and not a little bit coming from the front, one of the strange things start to happen. You get more of the rumbly feedback. So having a little bit of something coming back here enables the pickups to just kind of, it keeps the guitar from getting that thing, which nobody wants to have that happen. And so that the GT stuff, great for going direct, great for running into the power amp in, which I guess I didn't list as one of the templates. But the idea is now what you're doing is you're using your modeler as everything except for the power amp section and the speaker section of the amplifier. It's a great way to work with stuff, at least in my experience. All right, here we go. Shane, I have an HD 500X for that. I love that unit. I actually, I love the way the AC30 works in that, actually more than the way it does in Helix, simply because if you turned up the gain, I think it's called gain or it's called drive, I forget. It's been a minute. But it was this nice thing where it kind of starts to dial back on the high end, so it's that perfect blend as if, you had one, because if you think about what you want when you're playing a slightly less distorted or less driven part, you want a little bit more high end to make sure that any kind of murkiness, if you will, that's happening in kind of some sort of AC30 model, again, I talked about before, the bottom end can sometimes be a little bit floppy. The idea is you want enough definition so you can hear the parts. But when you begin to get louder, that same thing that gave you definition at kind of the cleaner parts now starts to get a little spiky. And so there was something about that model that when you turn up the drive, it just pulled a little bit of the high end off, and it was just like, it was perfect. Love that. Chris, I like the idea of stereo, but I feel that in a lot of halls it's not necessarily that good because other than the few people in the middle of the room, most people will only really hear one half of the stereo. True that. So one of the biggest things, and again, I want to make sure I get through everybody's comments here, which thank you so much. Look at all that. Oh, you guys are awesome. And I will hop over to YouTube, and there we go. Gentlemen in YouTube, Camillo, give me just a moment, and I will be with you. First of all, hello to you down under. All right. All right. So the deal is here. Let me make sure. Saner. There we go. Okay. Thank you for that, Brett. All right. When I went up to Canada on one of those trips, I played a venue somewhere. I did an instrumental gig at a venue. I don't remember where it was or kind of how it all came together. But I remember the other guitar player having too much effects. And this is one of the things, what works at home in your studio does not necessarily work in a live venue. There was a period of time where Joe Satriani played in stereo. And then kind of one of the things that happened that he heard a live mix where they flipped the phase on something. He was like, never again. So he only plays in mono. Now, here's the thing. He's in that center channel, right? So let's just imagine that I'm using delay and reverb, not so that you can really hear the dotted eighth note and really hear the quarter note over here, but you're kind of feeling it. And it's kind of washy, and that's going into a reverb. And so the idea is that it's more this kind of wash that's hanging out in the background where it's ambience, but a nice ambience. One of the things that I love to do, and this is an important piece of this, is I like to put modulation on the delays. And what that does, the Deluxe Memory Man is a great example of it, is that you're taking, and if you think about chorus, it's a short delay with modulation. So I just take a longer delay and add modulation. And so the neat thing is you hold a chord, and it's the most beautiful sound because it's as if you took a regular delay and then ran the delays into a chorus. And traditionally, in most scenarios, you're going to run your guitar, then you're going to run the modulation, and then you're going to go into your delay and your reverb, generally speaking. And arguably, you're looking at that because of the length of the time. That is to say, a chorus has got a short delay. A delay has a the length of a dotted eighth note or a quarter note, compare it to a reverb, which is about this how long it takes to travel in this giant space traditionally, and how big that space you're going to actually make it, and so on and so forth. You're kind of generally, in the same way, you can. It's just kind of working along the time chain, if you will. But adding that delay, but putting a chorus pedal after your delays, or more importantly, if you have pure delay and adding a chorus to that without adding the chorus to the direct signal, it's a lovely sound. And that's basically what it's doing. One of my favorite sounds. So in that instance, you're adding chorus to both sides. Now, let me back up a step and talk about stereo chorus. I would modulate both sides of the delay such that you don't have one side of the room. So if you ran out of a JC120, which the chorus that's in a JC120 is the CE1, Boss's kind of flagship. That's where it all started with that chorus. Chorus Ensemble 1. Great sounding unit. And if you listen to that in stereo, one side's completely unaffected and the other going, if you listen to just that, you're going to get seasick and you're going to want to find the power cable where the guitar player's plugged in. If you have to hear that, you're just going to plug it. Hearing the two together is beautiful. Hearing just one side, it's nauseating. So yes, you want to be careful about how much differentiation you have in your left and your right. Absolutely. So stereo in moderation. That's a great point. Cartesian algebra. Thank you, Shane. Robbie Stigman, how are you? Good to see you, my friend. Every guitar needs a unique technique. There we go. I played two different strats differently according to string gauge. Thank you. Clean, dirty, etc. With same with the Gretsch LP. So here's an interesting thing. I'm really glad you mentioned that. So I had two freakish things happen. I've always believed, and because when I tour, I always take two identical guitars, which never sound the same. So I ended up buying a guitar from Sweetwater, and they ended up sending two, and I'm really glad they did because it's now been discontinued, but I think it's like a 2017 or 2018 Jazzmaster. And it's before the Player series, and it has an actual rosewood board. These two guitars sound so alike, it's freakish. Kind of like, the thing that never happens, because I've been like, never get two guitars that sound alike. Never gonna happen. Like, I literally would plug them in. I can't tell the difference. And they feel just the same, which is even crazier. I mean, it's just kind of like, generally speaking, I couldn't agree with you more. And then every so often, there's that outlier that you're just kind of like, how did that happen? And then, so then, it's an interesting thing because I thought, okay, maybe what I do then is I actually use the one that I put a little ding on the bottom and use that, put a mastery bridge on there or change the pickups out because, if you can demonstrate initially that the two sound so much alike, then you start swapping stuff out and then you have a great example to demonstrate stuff, at least for Jazzmaster. But yeah, I've never played two strats that sound alike, just never. Never. And I hope I do someday. And I hope I have the opportunity. I hope they sound great, and I have the opportunity to have both of them. Christopher Aaron Smith. The other thing to think about with strategy is how your style and sound fits with the other guitarists. Do you want to blend with what is already there, or help make a fuller sound? And this is the thing. Is that we can choose to. Again, if you think about a great recording, I don't know how many of you spend time recording, but a great guitar sound basically takes next to no EQ to make it sit right in the pocket. Now, why is that? Just because you have such an amazing sound? Maybe. I can buy that. Like John Mayer always sounds great. But what happened is you just kind of went for the right thing to fill that space, right? And that will potentially change from song to song. And this is kind of, my micro rant about playing with tracks is that you've got all these sounds that wrap around a completely different drummer and bass player. And now all of a sudden the groove's being played in a slightly different place and the snare drum sounds different and the bass is a different bass. And so all of a sudden these very core elements of what's going on. And mind you, I've worked with some amazing vocalists, over the years, worship leaders, but they don't sound like Kim Walker Smith, nor should they. So all of a sudden, you've got this strange combination of stuff happening. So the idea is kind of going, how do you make what it is work? And it kind of gets back to the thing I was talking about, the kind of the stereo delay thing, is that I'm kind of filling some of the space with this warm ambience. And so the operative word is not ambience, warm ambience. And the idea is you're creating this warmth to kind of fill in the grooves. And it means that it's just, warm. It's a funny thing when, of all the, the words that we use to describe sound, spiky, it's like, you got an ice pick versus warm. You think about a warm sound, you immediately feel good. Like, oh, I had this really warm sound. I literally feel it in my arms. I know that sounds maybe silly to some folks, but it's the kinesthetic part of somehow sound translates to feeling that we feel in our body. And when we're reminded of that feeling, we go there. It's like when I think about John Mayer's guitar playing, I have an emotional response to the way I feel about the way he plays and the sound of what he does. Just a thing. I digress. Chris Kettlewell. Hello, Chris. One big danger with modelers as a guitarist now becoming just able to copy other people's tone all the time and never really finding their own. So, Chris, I'm going to agree, but I'm going to gently push back. At one of the guitar camps of the Joe Satriani G4 experiences, he said something that was really funny. It's totally relevant to your comedy. He said, thing about playing the blues is you've got to play a certain group of licks enough like they were originally played and the way that everybody else plays them so you get to be in the club. But to be, or you get to come into the club, but to be a member of the club, you now have to play them your own way, right? It's kind of a funny, like if you think about the classic blues licks, there's, I don't know, let's say 50. I would say that if you ventured to learn the 50 most popular blues licks, the Albert King stuff, if you learned those, you would, and played them with authenticity and feel and emotion, people go, great blues player. Now, to the heart of what your point is really about, I think and I hate to do this because I don't want to beat up on the very, very kind people at Strymon, because they're a great bunch of folks. But I now have a timeline and I have a big sky, and now I get to imitate so and so. So I'm of two minds about that, and I'll be honest about that. On one, I'm like, you know what? If it makes you happy to be able to get the same sound as Jeffrey Kunde or St. Pope, awesome. How much time have I spent trying to imitate Joe Satriani or Steve Vai or Jimi Hendrix, right? So I mean, so I'm like, so there's like, if it floats your boat and you have an amazing experience with it, and people can see that there's something positive happening in that equation, it's good. Now, that said, not everybody has the ear to find their own sound. So and here's the thing is I will say this is I had a conversation with a friend today, and they're about 10 years younger than I am, and they're one of the people that I admire most in the world. One of my biggest sources of input, because they are exceptionally smart and have exceptionally good advice for the Dougster. But they're a little bit younger than I am, and the thing that I've learned in the 10 years difference between our ages is that I used to be a lot more of a hard ASS, and I found that I tend to err on the side of being overly gracious a little bit, not a pushover, but I just kind of go, you know what? I think people are just trying to make their way through. Now, if you'd asked the Doug 10 years ago, I'd be just like, get your own sound. But again, that's the same guy that's imitated Eddie Van Halen, Joe Satriani, and Steve Vai and Jimi Hendrix for years. So I mean, like, I'm just a hypocrite. So to answer the implicit thing is like, I'm a hypocrite. I think we're all hypocrites a little bit, but yet at the same time, we don't want to chase somebody else's rainbow, right? Sounds like some stupid Skittles commercial. You get the point, and I get yours, and it's true. If we want to find our way to express ourselves, and it's totally true. Chris Kettlewell, a Tube Screamer or one of the many Tube Screamer bass pedals? That's a great question. There are so many. I had a full-tone, full-drive tube before I got my Helix, and it was awesome. There are so many OD pedals based on the Tube Screamer, but with so many different options. Okay. The reason I just said, dude, go get a TS-808 or a TS-9 is because, it's just like, I don't know, give me one of those. It's like, it's going to, it's a church I used to attend, the senior pastor said, we don't want to be a Cheesecake Factory. A Cheesecake Factory, I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's got a menu that's literally this big, just like you can get anything. Well, sometimes it's just like, just give me the Tube Screamer. Kind of started there, right? And it's a great place to start. And yeah, there are a lot of variations out there. The other thing is I will say this. Ironically, and it's perfect dovetail on what we were just saying. It's like, I want to know what the guys whose sound I'm inspired by. Daniel Carson, he's a full drive guy. Like, he swears by it. So I'm like, okay. And I've got one. I literally saw it earlier today. It's sitting there in the box. And I bought it, and I have yet to plug it in. So you've piqued my interest. I have more drive pedals than you really, really want to know. I'm almost embarrassed for myself. DD20, Shane Wise. I know that pedal. All right, Wayne Schwartz. My Vox Satch pedals are incredible with more noise suppression and whammy going on into my tube amp. A great thing when you dial back the volume, it cleans up nice. I wish Vox was still making them. Those are great pedals. So the Vox pedals, just as a little bit micro bit of history. Joe Satriani had these signature pedals that Vox did. The Saturator was basically their take on a black bottom or a silver bottom DS1. They say it's really rude to go off screen in a live stream, but in this particular instance, if I can find that pedal easily, I'm going to grab it, and I'm going to bring it. And I'm really hoping I can find it easily. And I'm hoping that you can hear me. And I did. And I can grab a couple of things while I'm on my way back, which is a good thing, because I am on my way back. All right. Oh, gosh, we're going to do it. All right. No, I'm not going to find that guy. No. All right. Well, that'll do. Coming back. Bringing it home. All right. So, Bogner Red. I love this pedal. And it's got a built-in boost, because we all need a built-in boost. And then there is the black bottom. Woohoo! I guess I autofocused that. Or I didn't autofocus that. So this is a black bottom DS1. And so the Saturator, and this poor little pedal has been through all sorts of stuff. And it's, right, no, that's right, not the silver bottom. You want the black bottom one with either the black screw or the very early ones had a silver screw. In any case, it is the classic Satriani sound, and it's just a sound. And so the Saturator was just a kind of a modern take on that. The Time Machine, which is the delay pedal in that series, awesome. Just a great sounding delay. And, Mike, totally forgot Mike's last name, Joe's Guitar Tech, Mike Manning. We were talking, in my other life, I have the show Doppler's Gear Garage. Excuse me. And Mike was on that show. And, I was saying, my guess is that, they're now using the XFX3. But I was like, my guess is there's still a couple of time machines just in case, there was something and, there's a giant power surge and, something happened. He said, of course there are. So the time machine is a great sounding delay. It's just a phenomenal sound. There's a vintage and a modern thing to it. Just great sounding. Yes, 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 yes. Robbie, instrument level versus line level for the loop. Is the line level stronger or weaker than the instrument level? Great question. Line level is much, much, much hotter. Let's see if I can get it right. I think it's -10 and +4. And if it's not -10, it's -20. But I think it's -10 dB and +4 dB. And so the +4 is the line level, and the -10 is the instrument level. And there is also some stuff, and I'm not an electronics whiz. There's also some impedance stuff that is beyond my pay grade. That is to answer your question of the line level and the effects loop level is much, much, much hotter, which is why it just pummels the front end of a traditional stomp. And literally, like if you stick a Boss DD pedal, and I actually, as I recall, Shane brought up the DD20. As I recall, that pedal had a mode that you could take it from line to instrument level, which is very cool. In fact, I'm 90% positive, and I think I remember getting in there and kind of reading the manual and just kind of and doing that, which was very cool. Great question. Great question. There we go, Robbie. I love the DD7 with the onboard tap tempo. Hello. Like you hold it down, it goes into tap tempo mode. That is the smartest. I mean, can you imagine, like we got one pedal. Let's use that, and so you can then see a tap temp, and it's stereo or stereo out. And it may be stereo in, but I know for a fact it's stereo. Great pedal, just and for whatever reason people pan it. All right, stronger. There we go. Thank you, Robbie, or Chris rather. Miguel Nunez, how are you, my friend? Good to see you. Let's see. This is crazy good. Now I need more gear. Woohoo! I'm an expensive friend, I got to tell you. Awesome. Wayne, man, I got to order some more pedals. That's funny. All right. Replying to Chris, Christopher Aaron Smith, this is a danger. However, guitarists have been doing that for a while, and when it comes through worship guitars, we've been stuck in a rut for a while. Yep. The modelers do give guitarists an all-in-one option, head rush, helix, because I may be confused. No, that's fine. It allows them to experiment more. Okay, so here's the thing. The neat thing is that eventually you're sitting there at some point in time, and you're sitting there with a guitar and your gear, and maybe there's no tracks, and all of a sudden you start going, ooh, I hear something. The great thing about the gear is like, yeah, we can chase other people's sound. I'm as guilty of it as anybody. But at a certain point, we have a moment. My favorite time to actually kind of craft demos is at about 6 to 8 in the morning. I come down here, and that's the moment that I'm not thinking about it, and that is an important piece of this. It's just like, being around when whatever it is that falls, you're catching it and grabbing hold of it. And the gear helps, there's nothing like trying to get a great vibe with a bad sound. I can't do it. Ramiro, hello, my friend. In my opinion, the 808 is a bit dark. Talking about the tone, I love it, and the 9 is a bit brighter. I would agree with you, but I would have to set them side by side. But in my recollection, I would agree that I found the TS9 a little bit brighter. That's a great word. Brighter is exactly it. And nice to see you, my friend. Always a pleasure. And let's see. Shane had a Tweed PV Classic 30 and a Vintage 30. You can play anytime you want. Thank you very much, Shane. That's probably a lovely combination. Awesome. Jam, how are you, my friend? What a pleasure. Is that a Kemper and an Axe FX 3 you see in the rack? Yes. And of course the Helix. So for politically correct reasons, I actually had to put them F, K, L, FKL in alphabetical order, such that it didn't seem like there was any preference. But I am kind of besides myself to kind of jump into the demo end of things. Right, my arm was blocking said Helix. But basically what I'm going to do, I mentioned this a little earlier. Initially, I wanted to kind of leave a little bit of space between them, but the only one of these that has, kind of perforation on the top, actually, I'm sorry, that has any perforation is the Kemper, but it's on the bottom. And so considering heat has a tendency to rise, I was like, you know what? And I looked online and it didn't look like there was any problem. So I'm going to actually stack the 3 of them on top and put Boss, Roland, Boss, Roland, Boss, Waz a tube amp expander. The Boss is going to go on the top. So it'll be in alphabetical order still, and there'll be a power. I've got an extra power supply that's in an old rack that I'm gonna, or a rack mat power. So yeah, I'm kind of, and I'm gonna incorporate a bunch of that stuff into the Tech 21 demos. I'm really excited, really, really, really excited. Oh, Wayne Schwartz. All right, I was able to go to Hillsong 2 years ago, and the guitars had a pretty extensive pedal board, but I did not see an amp. Okay. So Wayne, if you're talking about in Balkan Hills, I got accused once of what do they call that? Something brag, humble brag. It was not a compliment. So let me just say that one of my favorite experiences was my wife used to be a member of the Hillsong team. Used to sing background vocals for Darls, which was pretty cool. So I got a chance to go there and meet a bunch of those folks, and I've had the privilege of getting to know them over the years, which is really cool. Like over 10 years, which is kind of crazy. And sooner than later, Nigel's going to be on the show, and so we're just working on getting that date. But Nigel has a bunch of profiles for the Kemper, and so Worship Musician Magazine, who presents this show. We have a very strong relationship with the folks at Multitracks. So we're going to be having a bunch of the Multitracks content creators coming on here, and we will be leading off with Nigel, which I am super excited about. Because honestly, there are all the guitar players that I love, and I feel like Nigel. I feel about Nigel the same way that I do about oh my word. I can't believe John Mayer. I've temporarily lost my mind. Where there is an affection that I have for the way they express themselves on the instrument that just kind of is very heartfelt for me. And Nigel is an absolutely gorgeous guy. So one of the things that happened was, so I have this funny, strange thing. This like, I don't quite know how it works, but a bunch of the worship guys know that I'm a bit of a shredder. And the funny thing is, I don't know about Nigel, but all the other worship guys that I've spoken with all love AC/DC. Like and I'm not going to name anybody, but pretty much everybody loves AC/DC. And of course, that's not the classic quote unquote Christian band, but they just love AC/DC, as do I. But the point being is that I'm kind of known as a bit of a shredder, and I think it's funny that because the worship folks, they what they spend their time doing is not shredding. I think they have an affection for me, or I'm kind of like some mascot animal they like to have around from time to time. I don't know what it is, but it's entertaining for everybody and it's fun. So underneath the stage at Hillsong, there's a room where all the amps live, and so I got a chance to spend some time there with Nigel. And at that point, it was an AC-15 and a Spitfire, as I recall, in stereo. And it was just really cool to just hang out, just like in this little room. And so if you've spent any time doing any kind of stage acting or anything, quite often there's the rooms underneath the stage in a larger venue. So there was this room that was underneath the stage there, and that's where the amps live. And it was just really cool to just go down there and plug in. And so he had his board down there. And traditionally, his pedal board would be up on, like you said, pedal boards up on the platform. Quite often, it's a little yellow box called a Radial SGI, or two of them that are running in stereo. They run down to the amp room. There's the RX, which the TX transmits and the RX receives. So basically, what it does, actually, this is kind of funny. It takes the signal and translates it from an instrument level signal to a line level signal. And basically what that does is then it travels along a microphone cable, which unlike a traditional guitar cable, doesn't drop off the high end. So guitar cable after about 20, 25 feet starts to lose high end. Now, I will actually say I'm going to actually take a left turn there for just a quick second because this is one of the topics that I did not want to miss. Why is my keyboard not toggling between applications? This is so weird. I guess it's just because my computer is just being... Oh, I see what's happened. Oh, I got it. Aha. Fancy guy's got two monitors and doesn't realize that's happening there. All right, so I'm going to go to this little view here, and this right here, this little bag of cables, and we'll go back to the Nigel story in a moment. If you look, hang on, let me zoom in here. I guess I have to select zoom and pan. There we go. You will see that it has the word sad on it. What it means is that basically all these cables, and I won't let you see any of the brands that are there, hopefully. All the cables that are in there are cables that are not up to snuff. So I'm not a cable snoot, but I am a firm believer if there's one place that you want to spend your money and buy a Mogami cable, or in this case, I was at one of the guitar camps, and this is a kind of funny story. You know, it shows me being a jerk. I was at I think I was at the Steve Vai guitar camp, and the Roland guys show up, and they've got, you know, these Boss cables, and I'm like, oh great, just what the world needs. Another cable from yet another manufacturer, because, you know, there's a period of time that pretty much any manufacturer's like, hey, let's make some cables, we can sell them. And you know, so I kind of, you know, I had a bad attitude. And then I actually, one day I was like, I need a cable. It's like, oh, let me grab one of the Boss cables. And I pretty much only play through these now. So I generally, before I switch to these, and basically those are Mogami grade cables. I don't know about exactly what's in there, but they're gold connectors, and they're super high quality. I have not had one fail besides the one that I broke by doing some incredible. Oh, right, it was in the guitar. Oh, no, that we can't tell that story. But in any case, the Mogami stuff is really, really good, and it's worth paying for a high quality cable, because the last thing you want is a cable that's going to break. You know, can I hear the difference between the Mogami and the cables that are in that bag? Maybe. But I can hear the difference when the cheap cables in that bag are breaking, especially when they don't work anymore. Cables, 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 worth the money to get the right cable. I kid you not. Okay. Micro rant over. Okay. So yeah, so the Nigel thing, you know, being able to hang out there, that's where the amps live. And we went and saw Hillsong. They actually played with the Bethel folks up, I don't know, a couple hours here from here. And we went up, and the amps were kind of behind the curtain, so they get them away. You know, the amazing thing is the drummer, whose name I'm going to forget, plays at he's the loudest drummer I've ever heard. Like, you know, I think Keith Moon from The Who was probably loud. This guy, I've never heard anybody. It was the loudest thing I've ever heard. So you might have well had the amps up there, because they would have been drowned out by the drums. And he played great, don't get me wrong, but I was like, they took loud drumming to a whole different level. But you know, Michael and Joel and the other guy, that guy, Jaguar Strat, they were all playing through majority of twin reverbs and some matchless. But the sound back there was great. So I actually have a video of them. I'm back there with my iPhone, and it's just the section where it kind of goes down to this breakdown, and it's just the guitars, and it's the most, and it was like, you know, 120 dB of Hillsong guitar, but I'm back there, I'm like, it was one of the most special moments I've ever had, because just the interplay between the instruments was unreal. So yeah, they just keep them on stage. All right, Jim Giannini, I got a Friedman input buffer mostly to clean up my connections. To my surprise, it affected my tone in a really good way. My guitar never sounded this good. Can you explain a little bit about buffers? I can explain a little bit about buffers, which is to say, I do not know enough about buffers, and it's a weak point. So, but again, being humble and transparent, what I can tell you that my layman's understanding is this, is that, you know, first of all, I a moment ago mentioned that you don't really want to run your instrument cable longer than about 20 feet. 18 feet, I think, is the actual the point where the high end starts to drop off. Now, I'm going to say this, and I'm going, have you ever heard a sound person say to a guitar player, "Hey, can you give me some more high end?" I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but like high end has never really been our problem. Now, I will go a step further on the micro rant. Our head is here. Your average guitar player has their amp pointing there. Ears here, amp pointing there. You're not actually hearing the amp. You're hearing the amp soaking up into the room off axis. So the reality of what most people think their amp sounds like, which is down here and their head's up here, that reality is in need of a serious reality check. That said, is that there's a device to my right here. I wonder if I can get to that without destroying anything. Let's see how we can do here. I don't know if I'm going to get to that guy, and you may see the mess of stuff over here, but you know what? Let's see how we do. There we go. All right. Now we're zoomed in as far as we can go. Okay, this guy, oh, there we go. So this guy, well, you're seeing my microphone. Hi, Mr. Microphone. So this guy is a Millennia Music and Media Systems HV37. And the sole thing that I use that for is for reamping. And reamping is basically where you take the direct signal from the guitar, and when you're recording, rather than capturing the amplified sound, you basically just capture, and you can record the amplified sound simultaneously, but you're capturing the raw, naked guitar with nothing on it. And the great thing about that, the HV37, is that it is completely transparent. I mean, literally, I can't tell the difference between whether I'm using that or not. It just sounds like the guitar. It's totally transparent. And the reason I chose that one is I reached out to Joe Satriani. I said, I want to get a reamping preamp that allows me to get the cleanest possible signal. He gave me two options. He introduced me to the guy from Millennia, and this was one of them, and this is the one that I preferred. It's got two channels, so it means that if I'm kind of doing some sort of session where I want to use two different guitars, and I'm totally anal retentive, like even if one is like just like the smallest amount different, I don't want to actually just kind of turn the knob. I want to just be able to set it and forget it, and basically have one if I want to reamp one guitar or another guitar, or reamp the guitar and then reamp the bass. Want to be able to do this. So the stereo option there was important. The point being is, in that instance, I want to have the best possible cable, and I want to have it sound as much like the guitar actually sounds, such that as I'm running into Pro Tools and then I'm running out of Pro Tools, I'm able to actually kind of go, it's going to sound as much like the guitar going straight into the amplifier as it did in the first place. And that's one of the instances where a bad cable will really get in the way, and it's going to dull the sound. As much as most of the time guitar players are never asked to add more treble, I don't want to have to compensate for lost treble because I had a bad cable. Great point. Great point. Oh, I'm at the bottom here. No, I'm not. Hold on. All right. All right, here we go. There we go. So, I'm sorry, Jim, I didn't finish answering the piece. So buffers. So basically, imagine you've got all this cable going between you and your pedal board, and then the pedal board to the amplifier. Most of the time, if you think about the length of the cable going into your pedal board, and then the cable going from the pedal board to wherever the amp is, it's going to add up to more than 18 feet. So now you're losing clarity, okay? And so this is one of the things that by the time you start adding drive pedals and delay, it's not a matter of, and I'm going to contradict myself here just a little bit, but with some intentionality. For the same reason with the Millennia HV37, I don't want to lose clarity there. Arguably in your signal chain, once you've got all those pedals that's putting all this stuff in the way of your signal, you're getting further and further away. There's more cable, there's more circuitry, blah, 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 blah. So quite often what people will do is they will have one pedal with a buffer at the very beginning of their signal chain, quite often a Boss TU pedal. And so that basically creates a nice, clean signal all the way through there. Now, there are fuzz pedals do not like buffers, I think, before them, and but there is this weird impedance thing that I do not understand well enough, to be honest. But fuzz pedals and buffers, they don't like to talk. So that's the one thing you want to be careful of. But I think if you put your fuzz pedal before the buffer, I think it's okay. Sorry. All right. Oh, Melissa Doppler. So true. Sometimes it's just because the volunteer sound guy didn't know any different or gal, because that's how they were trained by the guy, or there she goes, before him, or gal. All right. Ask Doug about the amp room. Oh, no. Phil Beaumont. Hello, Phil. What's the best foot pedals out there for acoustic guitars like reverbs when I play at church? Oh, that's an easy one. I am looking to see where it is. There it is. Excuse me for just a sec, because I will grab it. Because it's going to be part of the demo for the Tech 21 Power Engine 60. Shimmer. The Shimmer on the H9. Acoustic guitar. So basically, you can set it so it kind of sits there for a minute, and then the last minute pulls up. The number of times I use this, so basically I use this, my church rig, for a long time at a church I used to be at. We would do kind of we would do evening church in San Francisco. It's kind of a funny thing. There was a gay nightclub that we rented out and did church at, and the sound system was unreal, and the venue was awesome, and it was great to be able to come into the city and just kind of proclaim Jesus. It was awesome, and so that rig was Keeley makes a compressor which basically has the chip from a DBX 166 compressor, which is kind of the classic studio compressor that bazillion records have been done, and that running into the H9 on the Shimmer sound into a Fishman Loudbox Mini, and that sound was like, and the number of times people would be like, that sound, because it's totally ethereal, and it's so yeah, H9 Shimmer cannot go wrong. But the little bit of compressor just makes it so that the transients, again, that spiky part with the pick, doesn't take your head off. Now, the other thing we did was Alive, Hillsong Young and Free that was kind of current then. So I also had a little Boss Mini wah in that rig. So it was kind of a fun setup. It was actually a lot of fun. It was a very cool time. Very, very cool time. Great question, Phil. H9. And I play a Taylor 114E. Yep. And again, the compressor will just take a little bit of the brightness off the top, so you can just kind of dig in and play softly. I love playing acoustic guitar in a worship setting. It's what's neat about it is that because you can get whisper, quiet, and get nicely aggressively loud, that range of dynamics, you can get away with playing with the vocals more of the time. Not that it's like, oh, I want more time on the playing field. What it means is you have more opportunity to sit with the vocalist and kind of work that dynamic. It's so funny. It looks so silly. I got a little monitor that I can watch myself, but it's a dynamic butterfly. It's literally kind of going up and down, and you're underneath the worship leader, and you're gently kind of working with them, and you're kind of. And the interesting thing is, it looks as silly as it looks. This is the worship leader. But and this is me. But notice I'm not going, I'm doing this, and this gives them the ability to kind of have this reflecting their dynamic range when they're quiet and in the middle, and when they're louder. And I'm basically creating this bed that gives them the ability to have that. That's one of the things about the acoustic guitar, whether you're plucking or doing different types of patterns. It's just really a wonderful vehicle for doing that. And that ambience from the H9, that Shimmer preset, just like the number of times people were like, that sound. And even people that didn't play, they were just like, again, it's kind of that same thing as that wash that just kind of creates a vibe. Great question. Okay, there we go. Andrew TMF. I think that's TMF. Either I need more glasses. You will love the headrest speakers. I have the 12. Awesome. Now, and again, so here's the thing. It's like pretty much I'm a speaker cabinet freak. There are. All right. So at some point sooner than later, this room is the last little bit of the studio clean is going to be done. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There are 9, 4, 12 cabinets in this room. And then there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 upstairs. And then there's some that are in storage. Um, no, there's more. There's 16. I guess I've got 16 412 cabinets in the house. There's 2 more back there. Um, I like cabinets and speakers, so virtually everything's got a 12-inch speaker in it. And again, I was so impressed with the what people said about the 8. I was just like, you know what, I got to try this out. But if I were to kind of go and buy the headrest things, I'd probably buy a 12, just because I think a 12-inch speaker and most of the guitar sounds we like, I think there's something about that. But I'm prepared to be proven wrong, and I look forward to it. Christopher Aaron Smith, I have a 12 and an 8. Oh, look at you! With another guitarist, we will play. We will pair the 12s as PA speakers and use the 8 as a monitor. Very clever. And that's basically what that started with. Those are from Alto Music is associated with them. Let me jump over to YouTube real quick. Camille Pereira. Again, nice to see you. Good day. Good on you. There we go. Melbourne. There we go. Leland, hey, what's going on? Shielded cables bleed off highs as the cable length increases. A buffer pushes the signal to unity gain, which keeps the high's integrity. Thank you very much, Leland. If I had a gold star, I'd give you 5 of them. Thank you for that. Camille, Nigel from Hillsong is scheduled to be on the show. We are just in the process of getting the date scheduled, and as soon as we have it scheduled, we will be announcing it with flags unfurled and trumpets blaring or something like that. Oh, it's going to be great. No, thanks, Camille. I'm an Aussie by I don't know what it is, but yes, so many great people in Australia. And some of the great people from Australia are here, literally here. All right, awesome. And again, Leland, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Yes, thank you. All right, let's see. Oh, okay. So Tammy Gan Redfern. Redfern, what a great name. I love that. Oh, wait, hang on. Somehow my chat scrolled here. Sorry, but hang on, just wait and say. All right, no. Lots of comments from Tammy. Okay, this will be good. No, let me dig in here. My chat reset itself here. Ellie Cotter, hello. That's my pastor. All right, okay, hang on a second. There we go. All right, hang on a second. All right, there we go. I found my way. All right, there we go. The 12 and the 8. Excellent. There we go. Sainer. Brett Sainer. I noticed a significant difference in the sound between the 108 and the 112. Trade off significant size and weight differences as well. My guess would be the 12s would have more low end. But the ratings on the 108s were through the roof, and like it was just some crazy number of people had bought the 108s. I'm like, okay, people are tripping on these guys, and they're crazy affordable. And I'm like, okay, I just need to understand this because you would think an 8-inch speaker. I mean, the Super Reaver's got 10s, but an 8. But that again, if you can't take your own medicine, you need to stop prescribing it. And so I go to Sweetwater and I look at the ratings of those things. They had the highest rating of anything in the category of all the amps. I'm like, okay, and I'm just like, I've got to check this out. Yes, Ramiro. The solution is in the in-ear monitors for you. No, that's Ramiro, I've got a hack for you. So another guy that's going to be coming on to this show and probably Doppler's Gear Garage is a guy by the name of Justin York. And he is one of my favorite new people that I met this year. So his brother or brothers play in this band called Paramore, who I absolutely love. So Justin is a studio guy in Nashville. His dad used to be the head of uh, 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 Capital CMG Christian Music Group. Um, and he's an absolutely lovely guy, and he makes IRs, and so we become guitar buddies. So he's going to be coming on here, and he's got some great IRs, and is an amazing guy. So yes, 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 the hack. Thank you. So what he does is that he creates an EQ pattern to imitate his sound, and I forget what he's running. Think Kemper, but he recreates the EQ pattern in his home stereo, but not like stereo. I mean, like, studio stereo setup, and he basically creates that EQ pattern and has them put that on the monitor board for his IEMs. That is smart thinking. I'm like, oh, that's a crafty guy. Yeah. So that is to say, if there's a particular frequency thing that you're digging that is in your studio, being able to kind of go, where is, do a little frequency grab of that and kind of go, oh, I want to make sure that, and that, kind of when you're wherever it is that you're wearing your IEMs, you're like, oh, I'm missing that. If you have the ability to kind of import some sort of preset or create a preset for that, then that's what he's talking about, or at least kind of go, then you probably already do this, but can you bump it up here? But the neat thing about being able to load that as a preset that he shows up with his little thumb drive, it's exactly what he dialed. It's pretty crafty. Yes, yes, yes. Thanks, Andrew. Much appreciated. Thank you. Christopher Aaron Smith to Phil Beaumont. I really like the Fishman reverb pedal for acoustic, but the LR Bags reverb pedal is great as well. Yeah, both of those guys have great stuff. I mean, they're different flavors, and they're both great. And I've worked pretty closely with both of those companies, and they're awesome people. One of the things that's here is the mounts. They've got some new software for the Fishman. Oh, getting old. Too much data. The hard drive's a little full. Their guitar synth thing. So so I'm going to be equipping a couple of the guitars. They sent some mounts for that. I'm always interested in exploring ways that you can make the guitar not kind of be something that's not, but if you have the ability to bring up some piano sounds or some string sounds, or more importantly, layer piano sounds over strings, and potentially add some guitar into that, and like bring it on, right? Because especially for smaller worship teams, being able to kind of, hey, let's write about this in the magazine, worship musician, of course, and be able to have some demo content to go along with it. That's a special opportunity to do that. And the Fishman folks have just been great. They're really good about supplying stuff so we can try it out and review it. Really good. And they're just a great bunch of people. Super quality, as is the LR Bags folks. Just everybody. Brett, one thing we talk about a lot is guitarist Brett Sainer is our rig. But the one thing we miss, especially in smaller churches, no matter how good our rig is a sound person is not very good. It will sound bad or buried. Oh boy. I don't know how much I want to take of that bait, not that you were baiting me. I think, all right, so the solution that I had when I wasn't happy with the results that the sound team were getting was I joined the sound team. Not to boss people and show them how to do it. I had to learn how to run a soundboard. I'm not great, but I can here's the thing. I'm not great at knowing all the nuances of live sound mixing, but I'm not bad at about going like, oh, if I can get the musicians to sound good on the platform and play well together on the platform and get a blend on the platform, then all I need to do is kind of know how to place the microphones and have the right gear. If it sounds good up there, generally you can then begin to get it sounding good here with a minimal amount of stuff. And somebody asked a question where I was talking. And I don't remember the specific question, but it had to do around, and I mentioned about the blend, is when things are actually, they sound good blended together, you don't have to add a lot of EQ. And yes, you'll hear sound people talk about EQ is where you make things kind of come forward or pull back, but ideally, if the musicians learn to play well together, and Ramiro, I'm I'm going to gently shake your tree just a little bit and say this, and this is not directed at you per se. The challenge with musicians that spend okay, I'm going to sound a little old school here, so just bear with me. If you look at Steve Vai and Joe Satriani, you're going to notice something very interesting. They don't use in-ear monitors. They play through wedges. Their sense of bearing comes from a Jimi Hendrix era. The idea is like, I need to hear what's going on in the room to hear what's going on in the room. Now, the interesting thing is pretty much the Petrucci and Forward, all those folks use inner monitors, and they're not sucking, right? But there is something about the fluidity in the way that Joe and Steve interact with the space that is happening because they're hearing the space. There is and if you think about the way, and I love John Petrucci, and by the way, if you haven't heard his latest single that has was released 4 days ago, and has 400,000 views. Holy cow! And what's neat is he waits till he's about 2/3 of the way in the song before he kind of puts you over his knee and says, "Now it's time for your spanking." So he's nice and melodic, really pretty, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Time for your spanking, son." And there's some good spanking going on. It's really lovely. But his kind of feedbacky, if you think about Flying in a Blue Dream, or you think about Blue Powder, Satriani and Vai respectively, there's a vibe about the way they're interacting with the sound in the room that lives with them everywhere they go. That's part of the shtick. And so most worship teams that are on in-ear monitors have a tendency to put their channel up and aren't great at blending. And it's because they're putting their channel up and aren't thinking about blending, they're thinking about hearing themselves. Sorry. And it's because we haven't done a good enough job of actually getting people to actually learn how to play like a rhythm section, which means you stop the band, go, all right, drummer and bass player, loop the verse. Actually, let's loop the intro. Keep going. Now listen to each other. Now actually hear that you guys actually aren't really locking at all. Or are you locking with a click? All right, cool. Now that we got you guys there, let's add the keys. Okay, keyboardist, do me a favor. Don't hit octaves in the left hand and drown the bass out down here on the keyboard. That doesn't sound good anywhere. Oh, I didn't know. You can hit maybe just one octave, or if you hit the octave like that, just don't have it on a super bass heavy sound, because you're just walking over the bass player and you're creating mud. And then all of a sudden, now I want you to listen to the bass player and hear what they're doing. It's like, oh, there's a bass player over there. Oh, I got to lighten up with my left hand. When you're just listening to your left hand, is when you've got the keys like this and you're like, oh, it sounds great. Generally, you're not listening to the bass player. The whole point is we don't really do a great job of learning how to learn as an ensemble. And then you start stacking the other instruments. When you start doing that, then you begin to think like a band, as opposed to a bunch of people that were rostered the same week. I'm not intending for that to be as harsh as it possibly could sound, but that's just kind of reality. I think we can be honest, right? Okay. Hello, Ellie Cotter. All right, let's see here. Okay, Chris Cattlewell. I do find it frustrating when I can see a guitar player playing some good parts on stage, but I can't hear any of them. Yeah, no, I feel you. It's like you really just go like, they actually rehearsed for this. You might like even just like once, and it's like, and I'm gonna be that guy for a minute. I'm like, I heard the guitar. Nope, it's gone again. I was at a church, which I will remain nameless, and it's not a church that I've named previously. But like, just tracks. And every so often, I think in retrospect, I figured out that that they always used autotune, because there was one worship leader that every so often it would be so far out of tune. Like you'd be like, like the key and that person were kind of like just different things. And I finally realized that the person is auto-tuned the entire time, that they're singing out-of-tune the entire time. And basically at a certain point, it became so far out-of-tune that even auto-tune couldn't fix it. That is somebody that should not be on a platform until they learn how to sing in tune. If they can't sing in tune, get somebody up there that can sing. And that poor guitar player just strumming away, not hearing a note of what they're playing. Tracks this loud. Tracks and auto-tune. I'm going to leave that subject. Let me not be a bad influence. Grace. Leaders are going to do what they're going to do. It wasn't the right church for me. And I would have been another guitar player up there that you wouldn't have heard. Okie dokie. Ellie knows who I'm talking about. That's terrible. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. Okay. Hang on a second. All right. So I see a great bait question here. What happened to the top of my chat? That's weird. It just ate my chat. All right. Okay. There we go. Okay. Give me just one moment. I trying to replace my acoustic by putting a piezo in the bridge, electric things like that. Put an acoustic in my hands and will simply play a lot differently. To the acoustic, same thing, play differently on my Gretchen and my Strat. So replying to Robbie. Okay, got it. That's I'm gonna let that one walk through. I know nothing about music, but I feel blessed and amused. I'm brain injured, but I remember nothing but music. I don't know, Tammy. Um, is that tone deaf? I don't know. Um, I remember nothing but music. That's pretty awesome. Of all the things to remember, that's awesome. That's a gift. Wayne Schwartz, that is. I've been playing on worship teams for 30 years now, and I've learned a lot as far as my style. My own music ministry outside of church is more rock, instrumental, or shred. But when I'm on a worship guitarist, when I'm in worship guitarist mode, I have to complement the song and the other musicians as well as my leader. Sometimes during the free worship times, I can let loose a little. Amen. I have learned not to be the main one in the mix. I also have to be in worship mode and not in performance mode. That's wise words, my man. Dynamics are huge as well. Any way we could go on and on. I hope Doug will cover this as well. Okay, yeah, I will gleefully talk about that. Now, it's an interesting thing, and you might have heard me mention this before. There's we used to go to a church called Cornerstone, great church here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And somehow my wife ended up with something that somebody put in one of the comment boxes, which is, my hair was long then. It's like, I love the way the guitar player with the long hair worships with his guitar. And I was just like, yes. More than anything, I wanted people to really not focus on what I was trying to do, but go where I was trying to lead them, right? So it was a very intentional thing. And the thing, it was a relatively conservative church. I had more hair than all the other dudes on the platform put together. But they understood that I had a heart and a passion for worship, and they rostered me a lot. And it wasn't because of how good I could play. They rostered me because I was really prepared. I did everything that I could to bring my best. And it was neat midweek rehearsal on Wednesday night. Chris, the sound tech, absolutely lovely guy. You'd go home with a CD, and I'd go, oh, it's terrible. Not the team, me. I was like, I'd hear everything. I'm like, but by the time Sunday or Saturday Saturday evening service came around, I was like, okay. It was such a great opportunity for me to go, because it's and again, this whole thing about active and passive listening. When you're playing, as much as I've tried to enhance my ability to actively listen, you're still slipping a little bit into passive listening, and you're passively listening to things going on around you, And to a certain extent, you're passively listening to your guitar because you have to be focusing on all the different things. So you're not quite as like left guitar, same, different, what's going on. All this when I get into, I'm trying to hear exactly what's going on so I can choose what I'm going to play of any of the parts that are there if I'm going to play them at all. Am I going to play something that feels like the parts put together, even if it's not the two parts put together? Am I going to go down to the bottom of the neck when they were in the middle of the neck to try and make it feel good to outline the chord changes to make it rise up there, and then go to the middle of the neck when it needs to come down using the different registers? But the thing is that the goal was that come Saturday night or Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, because we would do like 3 or 4 services. I don't remember. And on on Easter and Christmas, I'd do like 5 services, at least, which I love. I'm just like it was great. And Chris Pedro, the sound tech, and Sam, his predecessor, Sam. Um, they were just lovely to work with, and they treated me so well. They made it a joy to work as hard as I did there to kind of come in and be prepared so I could do everything that I could do to help contribute to an atmosphere of worship. And it was a fairly middle of the road church, so I was a little bit kind of an outlier, but they left me a lot of room to be me. So in that freedom, I didn't abuse that. What I chose to do was kind of go, how do I support the situation? So there was the freedom to be me, and at the same time, I also brought myself in enough such that I never was once told there, oh, you need to bring it in. Ironically, at a much more spirit-filled church, I remember the pastor saying, "You need to move less on the platform." And at that point, you're so paranoid and thinking about moving less on the platform. You're like, that just, I'm all about serving people, but when it gets to be like, you need to do this and you can't do that, I'm just like, it just like every instinct in me, I'm just like, well, I don't quite know how not to move with worship, and I don't know how to feel comfortable just standing there, and it was just weird. But again, that was probably as much about me as anything else, and again, it's knowing your atmosphere and playing to the room, and it just felt controlling, I guess, and it's a funny thing, it's we're all growing. So yeah, that's a great point. You just got to kind of play for the situation, and know what to do that fits. Thanks so much, Tammy. Absolutely, true Jesus worshipers are definitely highly welcome. Highly welcome. Chase the rainbow. Oh, the Dopster. You never know. Robbie Sigmund, when it comes to your own sound, it came to me after about 15 years as a lead player. I just found what I liked, and come on, it just jumped. There we go. Found what I liked and could dial it in everywhere I went. That's great, dude. Well done. Awesome. There are many awesome worship leaders, Tammy. Absolutely, we are a lot of great teams right now. Chris replying to Robbie. Gotta find your own thing. Absolutely. Oh, that's so funny. He's gone. I looked away, and it must be the raptor. Hopefully, not tonight. I got work to do tomorrow. Although, if it happened, that would be. That's great. That's right. Awesome. 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 Rogers and Mish, how are you, my friend? Great to see you. I think it's cool to go for a tone you've heard on a record, but your sound comes through your fingers and your heart. I'm using a True Tone Route 66 great overdrive compression in one. Great pedal. I spent a lot of time with one of those guys. It's basically, and again, there it goes back to, I don't know what compressor is in that, but I do know that the overdrive is, of course, Tube Screamer. And Bob Weil has spent a lot of time analyzing those circuits. Big, 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 big deal. All right, Tammy Gann Redfern. I have a question. How come you can't just pick up a guitar and it works right? I think it's practice. It's like asking me to pick up a I don't know a badminton racket and just kind of go out and be a badminton rock star. I think it just takes time and practice, and I think it's just a skill. Certain people, like if you think about somebody like Serena Williams, not badminton, obviously, but just an amazing amount of skill, but also amazing amount of practice. And so there's the gift, but to whom much is given, much is required. If you got just because you have the gift doesn't mean without the work that God is going to position you in a place where you can do that. God likes to position people where it's not just the gift that people see. People see somebody that has taken the time to develop that gift, regardless of how big or small that is. I have a thing that I basically say being great on the guitar or being competent on the guitar is about one thing: one third skill, one third knowledge, and one third talent. I've seen people that didn't have a huge amount of the talent, but they had a lot. They developed their skill and they developed their knowledge, and that's in the practice of studying and practicing, and that can outweigh people who they have the talent but they don't have the work ethic. Hard work goes a long ways. Okay, with delay, I love the option on the Headrush board that lets the delay sync with the playing. Absolutely, beat syncing is absolutely awesome. But I think you're actually talking about an automatic beat syncing, which is very, very cool. Very, very cool. Chris Kettlewell, I had a TC Electronic flashback for tap tempo. You had to hold the foot switch down and strum the tempo into the strings. Yeah, that was. I remember that. This is a blue pedal. I think. Oh, you said it. Sorry, flashback. Duh. Yes. Yes. Pretty crafty. Let's see. Melissa Doppler. I knew nothing about guitars until I married Doug. Turns out there's a lot to them that's different. Woods that makes a difference in the height of the strings, the age of the strings, and the thickness of the strings, the material they're made of. Boy, I've trained her well, and I don't mean like in train the wife, but I mean like well done. They are individual works of art, just like grand pianos all sound, just like grand pianos all sound different to each other, sound in different ways, and that's in response to Tammy, um, uh, which is lovely. Thanks, Mel. Nice. Christopher Gianola, how are you, my friend? How is Nashville treating you? Great to see you. Great to see you. Great to see you. Yes, that is an Axe FX3. And then there's the Kemper and the Helix, and I will hopefully be making good use of them. Yes. All right. Good, 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 good. All right. Christopher Aaron Smith, compare using an 18-foot cable with using a wireless transmitter like a Line 6 system. So this is an interesting thing. I keep referring to Steve Vai, but Steve is a tone guy, right? And so he used the Line 6 wireless stuff because it sounds really good. And one of the things that they've got in there that you're alluding to that not everybody necessarily knows is they have something called cable tone. So the idea is, let's just imagine you had a cable that was like this long and you're kind of plugged right into the amp. Well, in the same way, after 18 feet, the high end really starts to take a dive. It's gradually working its way there, I believe, until it really gets to a certain point where it has a big drop off. Um, so the idea is that cable has a sound because basically what it's doing is, without going too far into it, there's impedance that comes out of your guitar, and the stuff that you stick in between the guitar and the amplifier loads down the impedance of the pickups. And so if you look at the radial pedals, they'll have something that's called drag, and basically allows you to choose how much load you're actually putting on the pickups. And there's a box that's one of my favorite of a number of great devices they make. That's their Tone Bone AB, I think is what it's called. There's a second version of it that I've got that's awesome. It's an AB box. But the idea is by the time you kind of go into that box with a cable and then out to those different amps, you want it's going to impact the way the guitar would have sounded if you'd plugged straight into the one of those amps or the other one versus when you're going into that cable, into the box, into the amps. So being able to manipulate that a little bit is one of the things that the radio guys have built into that. And so the idea of the fact that the cable does affect your sound and different cable affects your sound. The idea is that, imagine if you've ever played, this is the sound version of this, but if you've ever played outside on a really windy day or on a really foggy day, the sound doesn't travel very well because there's all this moisture in the air. The more stuff that you've got in between you and the amplifier, there's more stuff in between it. It begins to load your signal down, and you lose the clarity, and you will also begin to lose. And this is an interesting thing: is that because there is stuff that I don't understand involved, it's not like the whole volume level drops. It drops. It at different frequencies, it affects it differently. And the high end is the first thing that you start to notice. So the cable tone is a big deal. The line 6 stuff is really great. All right, there we go. Tammy, Lincoln Brewster seriously forever changed my heart back to soft and warm. I love that. Lincoln is somebody that is, first of all, that I would actually, I would call Lincoln a friend. So we spend copious time on the phone talking about IRs and studio and streaming, and he's one of the wisest, funnest guys I know. So I am with you 100%. He is amazing, and he plays a mean guitar in a good way. Okay, Christopher, comparing an 18-inch... No, okay, there we go. Scroll past it. Brett. Doug, you said in your promo for tonight about maintaining guitar. To the point, how would you set up and maintain a Strat 2-point trem? I can't get one to stay in tune at all, even with light. And I know strings is missing there. With light, small use, or even bending strings without using the trem. Let me just read that last little bit. I can't get one to stay in tune at all, even with light, small use, or even bending strings without using the tremolo. Okay, got it. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Back to this thing. Good. So the dealio is that your average tremolo guitar generally wants to sit at 2 spots, this being the bridge. And that happens for a couple of different reasons. One is that on a locking fine tuning tremolo, there are these knife edges and a stud that goes into the body, and the knife edge comes up here, and then there's another knife edge and a stud right here. So the guitar is doing this, and what begins to happen is that knife edge here begins to flatten out, and so instead of it being an edge, that edge gets flattened, and so what ends up happening is it then begins to rest at the 2 edges that get created. When you have one edge that gets flattened, you end up with 2 edges, and it likes to sit at one or the other of those. So then you're faced with, in that situation, presuming that it's got a locking fine tuning tremolo and a locking nut, of either pushing the bar down and tuning the guitar there, or pulling the bar up and tuning the guitar there and kind of locking the, because generally speaking, it's going to sit at 2 different locations there, the down location and the up location. Now here's the deal. If you do pull the bar up to bring it into tune, when you bend, quite often it's going to pull itself down into the down location, which is why generally speaking, you want to keep the bar in the lower location, generally speaking. Now, this is complicated further when you're dealing with a Fender Stratocaster with a non-locking nut. And so what happens is that, and And I had this conversation last Wednesday night. We had Phil from Solo Dallas, who makes basically the Angus Young sound. Phil creates the gear that Angus is able to kind of capture this sound thanks to this recreation of this device that they made back in the day. And there we go. I can reach it. Here we go. So the Solo Dallas stuff is great. So this is the original Stomp box, the TSR5, and I've got the other one around here. But basically, they've taken the Schaefer Vega wireless system. They've basically taken the components of that, and they've created a series of pedals around that, as well as a tower. And basically, that's how Angus got his sound back in the day. And then he kind of realized, oh, that wireless unit gave me sound. So they recorded with that wireless in the studio. And so now they've recreated the guts of that, and that's what was. So the SG that I've got, that I was kind of broke it out to play through, kind of go through my little pseudo AC/DC thing. The nut, it's not cut perfectly. It happens. It wasn't a super expensive guitar. So what happens is that as you play hard, the string jumps over the nut and gets stuck. Ideally, the string can move freely through the nut. So say, for example, I bend a note. The string kind of pulls out this way and then gets potentially stuck. I hit the string really hard, it jumps up, and it kind of jumps and gets stuck on the other side of the nut. The guitar goes sharp. I bend the string, it goes flat. So it's this whole thing that's happening that most of the time is because of what's happening at the nut. So most people's problems are happening because the nut is not cut in such a way that the string can move freely back and forth. It's one of the reasons at one point they were doing roller nuts. It's one of the reasons that locking nuts are a huge help, because they solve that problem. That string is not passing over the nut, it's locked down. So on top of that, there's one other thing that you're probably experiencing, would be my guess, is the high E string just keeps wanting to go sharp. And it's now we're past the Gibson thing, we're on Strats. So the trick is, what you do is you tune the rest of the guitar, and the amount that high E string is going sharp, you tune it flat. And one or two tunings through, that guitar will pull itself into tune, the high E string will sit in tune. Now, the tremolo thing and the bendy thing, that will still happen, but that thing where the high E string just wants to be at, a quarter step or a half step sharp, that little process of going through tuning it and then tuning it the same amount flat by the amount that it's sharp, and then going through once or twice, that'll solve that problem. And that goes a long way. So then you go, well, do I put it in the up position with the tremolo arm when I'm kind of done playing, doing any bar work? I pull it up. That pulls the strings across the top of the nut. But when you do a bend, that pulls the strings across the nut, and right. But then when you do pull it up, pulls the strings across the top of the nut. Right. Right, but then when you do the bend, what it does is it pulls the bar down, the string elongates and gets caught over the nut. So that's why you have to kind of keep pulling up on the bar, and what it's doing is continuously bringing the string back across the nut and letting it kind of be in the up position, where the length of the string is from the nut to here, and you keep pulling the bar up and you tune it in the up position, or you tune it in the down position. Generally speaking, on a Strat where I'm going to do a lot of bar work, I'll keep it in the up position. But it will have a tendency to wander a little bit when you do bends, so you just kind of got to find that sweet spot. Ideally, you get a really good tremolo system, and that's the thing about Lincoln Brewster Strat, is it has the vibe of a vintage Strat, but it's got the two posts, as I recall, and it does a great job of staying in tune. All right. Right, on the two-point trem, it may be also, sorry, Robbie, Brett, reading Brett, excuse me. Sometimes what will happen, like I talked about on the locking fine tuning things, the bridge will get etched, but also the studs will begin to wear. So I've got a bunch of guitars here that, I've broken in my life probably 20 tremolo arms, not kidding. So I can be aggressive on the bar. So what starts to happen is that it's metal on metal. It just begins to wear out. So it may also be that there's been enough wear and tear on the posts, the studs, that those have also gotten etched. So maybe just sometime when you're changing strings, take a look in there and see what's going on. That may also be the case. All right. On speakers, I used a long time a Pod X3 Live into a custom 10 monitor, and it sounded great. Also ran it direct to house. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Excellent. Custom 10 powered monitor, Robbie Stigman. Okay, good, good, good. Shane, are there pedal brands that don't work or play well with others? It's a great question. I love that. Not so much brands per se, but the order of wah and fuzz face. Fuzz faces. Shane, sorry. If I don't know, I'm going to say I don't know. So the order of the fuzz faces, fuzz pedals are super sensitive of what's going on into them. And so you don't want to run a buffer before a fuzz pedal in most instances. And so if you've got to answer your question, at the heart of what your question, at least what I'm going to interpret it into, is that if you've got a fuzz, you don't want to run a buffer before it, because that just freaks the input level it's expecting to see. And again, it kind of gets back to Len's comment. Ooh, there's more stuff in here. Hello, Leland. There we go. Shielded cables bleed off highs as the cable length increases. A buffer pushes the signal to unity gain, which keeps the highs integrity. So basically, what it does is it's basically changing, I believe, the impedance of the signal to just kind of drive it all the way through. And the fuzz pedals just hate seeing that shift in impedance, and they freak out and they don't sound right. They sound really bad. So the idea is any pedal with a buffer in it, you don't want to put it before your fuzz pedals. I think I think especially true for germanium-based fuzz pedals, but I think fuzz pedals in general. Dopster will do a little bit of research on that. So then it's kind of like, it's the type of a pedal, not so much the brand. To answer your question about the brand side of thing, I remember years ago hearing that high watts with, and this would be going back 30 years, did not like lexicons in the effects loop. How's that? When dinosaurs were roaming the earth. All right, let's see this. Hold on a second. Yeah, bridge issues about the guitar going out. All right. That's... all right, let's see here. Oh, that's so funny. No, I do a good job of baiting myself. Okay, hold on. For some reason, the chat just kind of keeps resetting itself, probably because I'm not answering these questions. There we go. Okay, maintaining gear. Okay, let me just take a quick moment and talk about gear maintenance, and also because I want to do it. I'm going to keep. What I love. Thank you. I was saying to Bruce, publisher at Worship Musician today, that I think people like hearing me talk because I don't seem to get enough questions or a lot of questions. But I'm so thankful to have a wealth of questions. It means that I would, if I'm not careful, I'm not going to get all my need to cover things. So I want to go back to a couple of things about maintenance and buying and selling, and then I'm going to jump back into the chat here. So right here in Doppler's bag of tricks, what we've got is, in addition to pedals, this little group of goodies is what I use when I get ready to sell a guitar. Or a pedal for that matter. So I've got a little bit of, I guess if I put it over my shoulder, you can't see it, little air. So I try and make sure that I get rid of any dust that's on something. Like, this came out of the box, but the point being is I'll get a bit of dusting. And then what I'll do is I'll grab one of my little Delios here, and one of the things I was doing this today. I've got a let's see if I can get it back there. Got a cabinet back there that I cleaned up and moved a bunch of stuff around, and that thing got super dusty. So I had to clean the pedals in there, and I was like, you know what? There's a lot of vintage stuff back there, so I was like, I want to keep that stuff clean, because what ends up happening is it ends up kind of getting into the pots there, which is why if you ever had scratchy pots, it's because dust makes its way from the face of this thing. Imagine like you stick it in some, maybe you loosely bring your pedal into rehearsal or something, you got it down like that. Well, dust just kind of floats around and it kind of works its way up into the pot there. And so keeping the face of this thing clean is actually really cool. The other thing about that, and I was putting away a couple guitars and cases today, is I'm really good about polishing any of the shiny surfaces, because what happens, especially, and I don't, but if you have kind of acidic or sweaty, fingers and whatnot, that stuff really has a tendency to oxidize these things, which is why it's really a good idea to wipe them down. I also have this guy, which is good for kind of, the dusty stuff, as well as the Dunlop, I don't know, guitar polish / cleaner. This is really good stuff, especially for finishes on guitars. So I'll use that and this terry cloth here. And then what I will do is I will photograph stuff once it's nice and clean. Every so often, once you actually go to photograph something, you'll discover that there's just some stuff on there. So I don't do the white glove test. What I do is I will use my fingertip and I will go ahead and clean it like this, such that when I go to photograph it, because what happens is it's kind of like that same thing about, and in fact, I can see stuff that you can't, but when you get really, 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 really up close and personal, you begin to see all the little smudges, and the thing about a camera is it has a tendency to do that pretty severely. So, in any case, this little box of tricks is what I use every time I go to sell an instrument, and I also do it when I'm getting ready to put an instrument away, because I don't want stuff gathering on it while it's sitting in the case. So that it's a different type of maintenance, but it's preventative maintenance, because it keeps the chrome from kind of bubbling and coming off. It also means that I also run this guy along the strings, not just on the top, but along the bottom of the string. I kind of wrap this guy around the length of the string. And that's the sound, of course, of it going up and down the string, in case you were wondering. And so that just enables me to, in fact, I would be surprised if there weren't a couple of little marks here, just where you can kind of see where one of the strings had gotten a little dirty and just kind of left some stuff on here. But, you probably can't see it. There you go. Actually, you can. So you can see the discoloration on this thing. Like, that's just stuff that was on a guitar, right? We don't want that on the guitar. We want it on there. And that's super important. So keeping the instruments clean is honestly an important part of it. The other thing is that, when I take an instrument out of a case, I quite often will run the pickup selector back and forth a bunch of times. There's only so much life that a pickup selector has. But what happens is it starts to oxidize as it sits in the case. So you're just kind of keeping that oxidation off of there. And that generally kind of, is how you kind of make sure that when you go to pick up the guitar, you're not getting crackle. But I will also do the same thing when I go to sell an instrument, because quite often if I'm selling something, it's something I haven't played for a while, right? So, boom, 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 because it's possible the last time I played it was fine, but as it sat there in the case, maybe it's just oxidized a little bit. So I'll do that, and I go back and I'll test it. And so I'm really careful to then keep things clean. And again, when I go to sell something, I take lots of photos and I try and put things on a nice clear background. I'm wondering what I can find that I can show you, if there's something handy. So let me see if there's something easy to find here. No, so we're going to move on. Changing strings regularly. There's a pointy guitar over there. I think it's over there. Yeah, I was playing it today. No, it's actually over there now. But it's a Steve Vai Gem Woody, and I was playing it. I'm like, you know what? The strings are done. And sometimes, the strings will be done before they break, and those strings are done. So changing strings on a fairly regular basis is another thing about those of you that have a tremolo on there. As the string begins to stretch out and lose its elasticity, the bridge will start to sit at a different location, and that's one of the reasons why when you change the strings, the bridge will potentially lift up, which is a whole other nightmare. And I will be making a video sooner or later about kind of changing strings on locking tremolos, and as well as traditional tremolos as well. Okie dokie. Great question. All right. All right. Robbie, thank you very much. I love using wedges over ears. It has a lot more energy for the band to respond to. But I also like having my own mix when using ears. There's a trade-off, and they both have lots of stuff that are to their mutual benefits. Oh, Brett, don't worry. And sorry, Doug, I wasn't trying to bait you. Just an observation from working with smaller churches over the years. Sound persons are one of the hardest people to find in those. Absolutely, they often have little to no training, or just want, and just want to serve totally. That's it. Some are really good, but have limited gear to work with. That too. Bad gear is a whole other thing. Tammy, I can assure you there is bass in heaven. Awesome. All right, Christopher, I'm in my bachelor's degree for worship studies. Awesome. I read about a church that held services in an alternative lifestyle club. Yeah, I mean, honestly, what happened was we were looking for some place. It was kind of in the peak while the .com thing was peaking, and you could actually, everybody could go to work and so on and so forth. It was really hard to find a venue because basically all the venues were being turned into places that .coms, startups were taking over. So I just I remembered this particular location and saw it from the outside, and we just reached out to them, and it was great. And they were really cool to work with, and we got a chance to be the hands and the feet. It was really cool. Robbie, don't move more. Don't make guitar faces. Make guitar faces. Different churches do it different ways. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. As Chris was saying, Brett, could be bridge. All right, let me keep scrolling through here. Awesome. Um, Brett, I've done everything you suggested, properly slotted and lubed the nut, roller string trees, good tuners. The bridge is the final piece. It's definitely not like a Floyd Rose locking trem, but I can set that up in no time, and it's in tune great. Yeah, I would pull the bridge off, and I would start kind of going, hey, what's going on there? And it's always possible that maybe something's happening maybe at the string tree as well. So just I would pull the back plate off, and I would just give everything an inspection. And maybe that one of because on the back of the block where the springs fit in, they kind of do this thing as they kind of get into the groove there, right? So maybe one of them is not grooved all the way in, and just kind of give them a little tap with a very gentle hammer or something very. And when I say gentle, I mean like one of those little baby small ones, or put something on top of it, like something that's doesn't have a point. I don't know, like a really really big straight head screwdriver. Just give them a little tap and make sure they're seated well, and then move the bridge a little bit and see if they pop up a little bit out of there. And also take a look and see if, because sometimes what can happen is that if the two screws that go into the body, sometimes what will happen is the plate that holds the springs, sometimes that'll move a little bit as you move the tremolo. So just kind of move the tremolo and take a look at what's going on the backside there and see if anything's moving there, because that's another thing you want to check out. Oh, the guitar's new. Huh. All right, so Brett's comment. So it's new, so it's not the bridge. Send it to Gary Brower. That would be he'll make it work. So here's the thing. Sometimes there's stuff happening, Um, and here's one of the other things that can happen is sometimes and you'll be able to see it if it's a painted guitar. A little bit harder sometimes on a guitar that's actually a natural finish. Maybe the studs are gently moving, and that can happen. All right. Christopher Gianola. All is well over here, keeping as busy as possible during this time, while also enjoying the beautiful weather we've been having here in town. Nashville, that is. Hope all is fantastic with you as well. It is. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, my friend. All right. Robbie, have to check out. Have a job interview tomorrow. Awesome. Awesome. Show them how it's done. If it's the right job, God's going to open that door. Christopher Aaron Smith, when it comes to maintaining guitars, is it dust that causes volume and tone knobs to become scratchy? And should they be sprayed with air periodically? That's hilarious. So that was a yes. And again, it gets on the surface here. You stick in your bag or whatever, and all of a sudden it's floating around in there. And quite often, when you touch one of the pots, you notice that there's a little bit of oil in there. So what happens is that the dust gets in there and it kind of becomes glue, and or glue-ish, and the dust starts to set in there, and then it gets cakey, right? So that's exactly the whole point with this is just keeping that stuff out of there is a great idea. And again, if you think about your average pedal board, without getting too graphic, think about all the places your feet go and all this, all the stepping you do on your pedal board. There's all sorts of stuff that ends up on your pedal board. Keeping that thing clean is probably a good idea. And maybe using gloves when you clean it. Just saying, especially if you play at a lot of nightclubs. Sometimes dust, and sometimes corrosion built up. And again, that's this thing. Sometimes air works. Most of the time when it's scratchy. I find a lubricant like Deoxit Fade Lube works well. Good. Awesome. What is my appraisal of Eastman guitars? That's so funny. Somebody asked me that the other day, Jeffrey Hatch. Hi. Nice to meet you. I have not played Eastman guitars. My buddy Ari used to be their marketing guy. And their guitars are gorgeous. And I have never played an Eastman guitar. Sorry to say. Boo on me. But they are lovely, and they had a guitar that was kind of how do I say it, Paul-ish that I saw. I was like, oh, I'd love to play that. They're supposed to be great. And dang it, I don't know. All right. Let's see here. All right, we have gone through at 8:22 all the comments. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to begin to wrap this up here. So let me just head back to my notes real quick and make sure I didn't miss any of my key things. Good. All right. Maintaining your instruments, important while you own them. Before you own them, the Sweetwater test, if it's something that Sweetwater carries, go take a look at it, see what the number of stars is and the number of reviews, and go in and review and read the reviews. Even the snarky ones. The snarky ones are actually usually the most revealing. A lot of people are enamored with the gear that they buy, and so they kind of have stars in their eyes until they decide they want to sell it. My favorite thing on Craigslist is like, amazing guitar. I'm like, then why are you selling it? Because when a guitar is truly amazing, I'm like, well, why would I get rid of an instrument that I have a need for? Versus, when I go to actually list something on Reverb, which is where I've been selling stuff as of late, I'm just kind of like, you know what? It's a great guitar. I just don't have a need for it, and it's time for somebody who's going to make use of it to play it. That's an important thing for people to know, as opposed to like, why is he selling it? So the point being is that before the sales process, there's the purchase process. Going and looking at Sweetwater, reading how many stars, reading the reviews, seeing if it looks like it's going to be a good fit in those reviews. If the people who are saying the things about the instrument seem like they're using it for a similar purpose, or you can kind of compare and contrast what you're going to do with it with what they're doing it, and it's getting favorable results. You're learning from somebody else's experience, good and bad sometimes. And then in turn, I generally find with something like, I'm just going to say it, Helix LT versus Helix, HD 400 or HD 300, what was it? 400, I think, versus 500. Generally speaking, it's worth spending that little bit of extra money and getting that little bit of extra rocket power, because you generally have a much harder time selling it on the back end, and you end up losing that extra money. Yes, it's a little bit more, for the price of admission, but at the point that you want to get rid of it, then it's that much harder to sell. And so that is, I think, an important part of this. Keeping your gear clean as opposed to letting it get filthy. This isn't a particularly dusty room, but as I was kind of, those shelves back there I put together a little over a year ago. I was surprised by how much dust was on there. I was like, ooh, I need to be cleaning stuff more often. So, again, having, if I can suggest putting together some sort of little cleaning thing that you have, so it's easy to do, right? Because when I have this box and it kind of cruises around with me, I don't have an excuse for not cleaning something. Then it's just pure laziness, and that's a different conversation that I get to have with myself. But generally speaking, especially as I'm putting a guitar away in a case like I was doing today, I'm cleaning those puppies up. And again, as I'm going to list something, I want my listings to look 10 times better. I have some paper upstairs that is rolled out, and I do have some nice lights, but you don't necessarily need to have it super fancy. Just a clean guitar and some good lighting, and taking pictures from a couple of different angles, trying to show any scratches that might be on there. But also, one of the tricks is sometimes reflections can actually look like a scratch that's not there. So it generally takes me about 10 minutes to photograph a guitar. Quite often what I'll do is I'll have it, from, a couple of different angles. One is in the case lengthwise. So if, traditionally your case, the body is here and the neck here is here, so long as it's not going to be a danger, I'll flip it around and put the body here, kind of leaning up on the support there, and the neck like that. Take a photo like that so you can see the inside of the case is clean. How many guitar cases have you seen where the inside of the case is just a mess, and you kind of go, this person, if the inside of the case is dirty, that guitar was dirty, which means there's all sorts of smut inside that instrument. So by placing the guitar inside the case there like that, they can see the condition of the case. Sometimes I'll also take a photo of the guitar with the case closed and the guitar sitting on top of the case, so they can see the condition of the case. My touring cases are a mess. The other cases aren't. The other thing that I'll do is I'll take the guitar basically in 1, 2, 3 angles. Then I'll also get the headstock. I'll also hold it up like this and try and get the back of the body. Or if I can get away with leaning it down on the face without trashing the strings and the bridge, I'll do that so you can see what the back of it looks like. And sometimes it's a good idea to take a photo of the back of the headstock. People want to know, has it ever had any sort of fracture or any kind of break there? So it's good to do that. But again, getting it nice and clean when you do that, it sends a couple of important messages. It implies that you kept that guitar and cared for it the entire time you owned it, not just when you went to sell it. Because honestly, a guitar that hasn't been cared for, there's scratches all over it. You can tell a guitar that somebody didn't take good care of. Same thing with an amp. There's a knob that's broken or the Tolex is scratched. And I realize that, when you're loading in and out of a gig, sometimes you come back and you're like, what happened to my amp? But there are also people that are just they don't take good care of their gear, which means it's been banged around and it hasn't been maintained. Changing your tubes on a relatively regular basis, and that, I have a thing from Orange that is a tube tester that allows you to kind of test how the tube life is. So, but when the tubes start to get funky, take them out of there. Take it to a quality guy. There's a guy here in the Bay Area that works on quote-unquote everybody's amps, and I take it to him, and it's not cheap, but I also know my amp is going to come back sounding better from him probably than it did when it was new. So with that said, I want to say thank you to everybody that was here. Really appreciate all the people that come every week. I can't tell you how much that means to me. Thank you so much. For the new people that dropped in tonight, thank you as well. And this has been a lot of fun. Really appreciate the opportunity to do this together. And the new issue of Worship Musician magazine is out, worshipmusician.com. We've got We the Kingdom on the cover. There's just a bunch of great content. On Thursday, if you happen to play keyboards as well, we've got a live stream with Tom Brooks and the folks over at Yamaha around the new YC61. It is a organ-focused keyboard. So it's basically got synth sounds, piano sounds, because Yamaha's got great piano sounds, and it's got some great drawbar organ sounds in it. But it's not a drawbar organ per se. It's just got a bunch of sounds at 61 keys, and Tom Brooks has produced a ton of worship records, just a bazillion records for Integrity, and he's a brilliant keyboardist and organist, and he plays with Alan Parsons, and he is the Fishizzle. So that's going to be happening at 1 o'clock Pacific time on the Worship Musician Facebook and YouTube. And perhaps I'll see you there. I don't play keys, but I will be hosting that. So in any case, wish you a great night, you and your family. God bless. Thanks so much for hanging out. Much appreciated. Cheers.